It looks like a skull, like very clearly.
Oh my god, it does look like a skull.
Yeah, and the Windwalker one looks just like Cartman from South Park. Oh, hello. How you doing, man?
Hello. Yes, good, thank you.
All right, so the last time we talked was just before the expansion, and there was like kind of some final thoughts on Warrior. If I remember correctly, you had some reservations about arms and a bit of content, and you thought that Fury, was kind of multifaceted and would have been pretty good. It's been like a month. How do you feel like Warrior has played out so far?
I expected Fury to be a little bit better than it ended up being, but Fury was pretty good at the start before everyone started getting 4 sets and stuff, because Fury did well without 4 sets. They're definitely fallen behind.
In what? Do you think that's in rating and in Mythic Plus?
Mostly in raid. In the Mythic Plus, they are kind of sort of keeping up, but they're not.
I feel like
they're not really that strong.
Yeah, I feel like Fury and Warrior and Mythic Plus is like in that class of classes that are a little bit under what like the perceived meta would be, right? Like I haven't been doing a lot of high Mythic Plus recently. I've been like went on vacation, did some other things. I'm pretty sure right now it's like Rogue, obviously, and then Moonkin is like turbo insane, and then that last spot is like a little bit up for grabs. I think people have been slamming Enhanced Shaman. I think people have been playing Monk there. I think Monk is actually closer to Warrior though. I think Monk is in a class with Warrior and a few others where it's like just a little bit behind how good those top classes can be. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think the top monks are probably a little bit higher than the top Furies, though. Yeah.
Okay. And then, I think that's true in raid. Like going into this raid, I know for Warriors, for us, trying to determine the value in raid of like Windwalker, Havoc, Demon Hunter, DPS Warrior, and then the tank counterparts of all of those is always this interesting like jumble of it's not always about how good your class is. It's also about how good those other specs are as far as like getting buffs in the raids. Like Warrior, it's much less about Battle Shout and more about like how many total rallies do you think you need for this raid. And I think this was a super weird raid because Prot Warrior was so dominantly the best tank for early progress, which a lot of other guilds base their tank comp off of early progress, which is actually interesting. I actually think after time and gear has gone on now, I think Double Warrior probably isn't the best comp, where it absolutely was initially. Like, so there was already like 2 rallies in the raid. So it was like, okay, do you really need a 3rd rally? I mean, 3 rallies is good on Razagath, it's good on a few other fights, but it seemed like Warriors didn't really fit like a niche or do a single thing way better than other classes did, outside of maybe their mobility and unkillability on a boss like Razagath was really, really good. But even then, if we had to spend a couple more days optimizing execute for that boss, at least in the world first race, that might have been one of the classes that got dropped for like, something with just a little bit more single target, or you would have just played arms and had a class. We had our Warrior play arms, for example.
Yes, Ricky played arms, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah, and he did a lot of single target too. But it was still like other classes, like Assassination Rogue probably just would have been a better arms warrior, right? If you had equal gear. So I think Warrior was in a super weird spot. Usually they're in a better spot. I guess my main question to you today, now that I've kind of heard about how Warrior has played so far in this patch, they are probably the class with the most changes in 10.0.5. I mean, it is insane. Like,
yeah,
it seems like, actually, I'll just kind of let you talk about it. What are you looking forward to with the changes in 10.0.5? We can kind of go over them a little bit closer once I find these update notes here. Actually, I think before we talk about the actual changes, let's actually not even talk about Fury for a second. Yeah. I think Arms Warrior had one of the biggest issues this patch, and this was huge in the world first race, huge in overall class balance, in that they made a bunch of really cool talent trees, some better, some worse. But one major flaw is that some talent trees are able to get all of their damage and all of their single target, and then they get their AoE with either like 1 or 2 points and lose basically 0 single target, and they gain most of their AoE. And those classes are so valuable in like raids and Mythic Plus, because those are the classes that are able to do good AoE, but also just slam bosses, where like Arms Warrior, Unholy DK, Elemental Shaman, if you're really speccing into that kind of AoE, your single target is actually gone. Like, it doesn't exist. And
exactly.
And I know that was my biggest holdup with Arms going forward. And just how do you think they addressed that with the talent tree going into 10.0.5?
They've redesigned the talent tree. The node that reaches Batestorm now only costs 1 point instead of 2 points, and then they added some more paths as well. If you go into the talent tree, you can see it. The
PTR talent tree. I'm actually going to pull them up side by side here. Okay. Oh, that's actually really nice. All right, so I'm looking at the Arms talent tree right now on live and on PTR. Oh, I can already kind of see it. Where do you think are the big changes?
So the big change is the Valorant Victory, the versatility node just above Bladestorm. That only costs 1 point now, and it also links to some really strong nodes on the left and right.
Okay, so this is like right into Bloodletting and Sharpened Blades, where before it was into... Oh, it didn't even have a connection to what Battlelord would be. Okay.
That's the big change, really. You can make builds now that have Bladestorm and still really good single target. Or you can go even further into AoE and still not really lose that much single target. I have high hopes for ARMS in M+, with this, because we can finally do AoE and single target. They did change something in the class tree for ARMS. We get defensive stance for free now. So if you go to the class tree itself,
okay,
that's free now. But on live, you have to spend 1 point for it.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's just an extra point. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah. I think that's actually like low key the biggest buffs that people will see. What people want to see and can understand is like a 5 and 10% buff to something. But what you've seen with a few classes in the 10.0.5 notes is that you've actually seen classes gain talent points by them making old talent points give you basically everything that you used to have, but they just cost 1 point now instead of 2. Like I think it's Brewmaster. Brewmaster gains 4 Spectre points in the patch. I think it's that. I think 4 points that they took before that were 2-pointers become 1-pointers. And I'm just thinking like, dude, imagine any spec in the game and just ask how much more powerful they would be with 4 points. And insane power. Like, I mean, just like I'm thinking Unholy DK just gains Gargoyle with their AoE. You know, like just like completely broken shit. So I'll just let you kind of keep riffing on that. Just tell me everything about ARMS going into the patch that you think is sick.
Yeah, so literally, you just couldn't do AoE and single target at the same time, like you said. But you can make so many builds now that have both, and it's going to be really exciting to try everything. Some single target builds will not even have execute, I think. Those will mostly be used for M+, though. I think.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. So you're saying before that if you're playing an ARMS build, it required you to kind of be good in execute. So you're saying even in a raid fight, you could be playing an ARMS build early in progression that had no execute just to learn the early part of the boss better, and then as soon as you start progressing for a kill, you could add execute back in?
For example, yeah. But I think the biggest use for that probably is just going to be M+. And yeah, you could use it for raid progress as well, I suppose.
Someone in chat said free sweeping. Is that correct? You just get...
Yes, that is huge. You have sweeping strikes for free. So on the right side there, you have improved sweeping strikes instead of sweeping strikes now.
That is so good.
So, yeah, there's a new talent there as well, Strength of Arms. I think that's a really, really nice addition, because the only phase where you feel like you're going to need rage, where you run out of rage, is execute. So having overpower give you rage in execute could be really, really big.
So how many like overall, with the reduction of points you have to take, and with things like sweeping strikes being added, understanding there's a little bit more complexity about them swapping things around, like where Bloodletting is, like how many like total extra points do you think you're gaining to swap around on your tree?
It feels like 2, 3, maybe 2 or 3. Oh,
that is so insane. Because ARMS,
maybe even 4.
Because that was the sad part about ARMS, is like ARMS was being looked over in a lot of cases, and but it was sad because it's not like they didn't have any value in either. Their AoE was actually really, really good, and their single target was really, really good. The only issue was that you couldn't even kind of do both, and every hard piece of content in this game requires both. On any, like, when was the last Mythic end boss where like your ability to AoE well didn't matter, right? Like it matters on literally all of them. It's super important on all of them. So ARMS is just in such a better spot now. And do you think it fills any holes that Fury has?
Fury really struggles on consistent damage. They have that Giga burst, and then they have nothing until the next burst. Well, it feels like it anyway, and no, it is like that. It is exactly like that. ARMS can have the consistent damage all the time.
And the burst execute too. Did you guys get Ignore Pain back?
Yes, Ignore Pain is next to Fueled by Violence. It's a choice node with Storm... what's it called?
Storm Wall?
Parry thing. Yeah.
Oh, that's just
so
pretty
Ignore Pain is sick.
Yeah.
Because it's actually sick, because that will synergize with Test the Might when you need to dump rage and you have no GCDs to dump rage.
Oh yeah, no, this is weird. I'm saying Storm Wall seems kind of irrelevant, but
yeah.
So Ignore Pain, but so it's good for dumping a rage. That's actually really interesting because you're trying to dump rage in that cooldown window. Do you think defensively it matters at all? One thing I noticed this expansion is it seemed like Arms Warriors in the past were really squishy and Fury Warrior was unkillable. I thought Arms Warriors seemed also unkillable in this raid. Do you feel that way as well?
They are. Yeah, they are pretty well tanky.
Well, what changed to make Arms so much tankier than in the past?
They gave Arms 10% avoidance for free. Fueled by Violence also heals a surprising amount. The one to the left of now. And yep, you have distance, you have spell effects. That's pretty much all you need.
Damn, that's actually huge. Okay, so we've talked a bit about Arms. Just any final thoughts about Arms? It seems like Arms is getting the kind of attention that a few specs in this game would love and kind of didn't get in the patch. Clearly, when Blizzard ran out of time at the end of like the design phase going into this expansion, it seemed kind of scary because like Warrior just seemed like a class that maybe wasn't fully prepared, even though they gave them so many changes, right? Like Warrior might have been the class that was changed the most. It just still seemed like it was deeply flawed. So I'm glad to see Blizzard, not even in a 0.1 patch, before it even got to a 0.1 patch, they kind of went back and fixed a ton of errors. And I think Arms, what they did to the Arms tree is kind of the goal of what other classes would like. So I feel like as a Warrior, you've got to be really happy.
Yeah, for sure. They did change something with Overpower. The improved Overpower on the top left and also Battle Lord. They used to only increase the damage of Overpower itself. But on a new tree, it will also increase the damage of Dreadnought. So Dreadnought used to pump in Shadowlands. It's the wave of AoE. That one. Yeah. That used to pump back in Shadowlands, but it's been doing pathetic damage in Dragonflight. So it's going to be really fun to play with that again.
So Arms Warrior stonks are through the roof. Okay, so current Fury Warrior stuff. Again, we kind of talked about how Fury ended up playing this patch. It's still kind of the same spec as always. You're just kind of just hitting stuff that lights up, huge rage generation, rage spending. So I want you to tell me about Fury, how you felt about it this patch, how you feel about it, like the changes that actually happened. But also, I also kind of wanted you to talk about Single-Minded Fury. I heard some stuff about maybe that coming into play a little bit. So I think there's a lot of weird stuff at play.
Yeah, I think Single-Minded Fury, it's still behind. It's not as behind because they did buff one of the Single-Minded Fury talents, but it's still going to be suboptimal.
Okay, so someone in my chat just made that up because I had someone in my chat and they were just like, I was talking about like how cool the arms changes were and they're like, dude, you're not talking about Single-Minded Fury. And then I was just thinking about all the talks I had with you and Dan, and then you guys were saying that like Single-Minded Fury was very clearly supposed to be a, like a noob-friendly version of Warrior. It's a different playstyle. It's not intended to compete with Titan's Grip, but it's like there if you want it, kind of.
Yeah, I don't feel like they succeeded with a noob-friendly version. I feel like it's the same. It's actually the same, but you lose 2 points because you have to invest into Single-Minded Fury.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So kind of just a mistake.
One thing about arms, though, I wanted to mention Fatality. Sure. Last talent on the left, that used to last 60 seconds. It's the ink pod effect. So if you go to the Spectre, yep, that's it. That used to last 1 minute. So any intermissions like Kurog or Rajagath, you would lose your fatality stacks in between intermissions.
Okay.
So with them doubling that duration, we should be able to use.
So most fights, you could still have it fall off, but most fights that would be very good. That's definitely really interesting. I have a small anecdote about that. So he mentioned Inkpod. What Inkpod was, for you guys who didn't play in BFA, was a trinket that stacked up like stacks on the boss over the course of a fight, and as soon as it hit 30%, it would explode and do like a ton of damage. So it was used because it was a good parsing trinket, but also it had a lot of really good effects on bosses that actually needed to die under that point. You're basically saying, okay, I'm not going to wear a trinket for the first 70% of the fight, but if 30% to 0 is the most important part, this is the best trinket in the game. We actually almost used Inkpod on Sire Denathrius. I wouldn't say almost used, but like when we were preparing for that boss, we actually still had our Inkpods from the previous expansion because in a scenario where the first two phases are super easy and you could keep the stacks up, you would actually still take, on like a 9 to 11 minute fight, you would still take an Inkpod explosion in Shadowlands at 30% to 0, and it would still be the best trinket for specifically 30 to 0, but it ended up that P1 and P2 really mattered. So like it didn't end up being a thing, but it did almost become a thing. Like if it was like N'Zoth, for example, like you would have done that. So it was something really interesting. So basically my only point is if Fatality has the ability to stay up, that's like, there's almost no other class in the game that can do something that unique, and 30% to 0 is already an insane thing, and Arms Warrior is already one of the best classes in the game for an execute burn, so maybe the best. It's like top 3. So yeah, super good.
Yeah, on Senars and Tettles, I was getting near 1 million pops on Fatality. So
On
it's a
Teros?
decent chunk. Tettles and
And
Senars,
that's a
yeah.
short fight. That's not even a
Yep.
bit. Yeah, that's imagine like the best use case scenario for this is some second to last or end boss where initial progression, maybe P1 and P2 are hard, but then eventually they're so downloaded that you can lose damage there. And then you play this and it's just one of those things where one talent point can make a spec the entire, like the best spec in the game. So super fucking OP. Oh, someone in chat mentioned he has the #1 warrior parse on Mythic Taros. Holy, wait, was that a self shout out? That's what we call a Zyro in our guild. Wait, I'm fact checking this.
Is that still true? Has anyone beaten it this week?
Oh, 2 people beat it, but just barely.
Oh, okay.
Guy in chat lied. Still huge damage though. Oh, you play Puzzle Box? Okay, how do you feel about Puzzle Box? Unironically.
Puzzle Box, it's a little bit annoying, but I don't mind it so much. It does sort of interrupt Arms' sort of feedback loop, spending rage, generating rage, but it's still such a strong trinket that you almost always use it. But there are better trinkets out there for Arms. I just don't have one yet.
What I don't understand is I've used Puzzle Box a lot, and I heard so many people complaining about the 2-second cast time, but then so many people were using the Guzzler trinket off of Broodkeeper, and it's literally the exact same thing, and those arguments didn't exist, and I still don't understand.
Yeah. No, exactly. And you can sort of halve that effect as well. If you use an ability first and then use Puzzle Box, you're using the Puzzle Box during your GCD anyway.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
So also, just before we move off of Arms, you mentioned a lot of talent tree movement and a lot of other changes. Were there any just baseline buffs to anything that are relevant that we haven't talked about?
Oh, Spiteful Serenity. You know the talent and the Colossus Smash there?
Yeah. Where's Colossus Smash? Oh, right here. Yeah,
Colossus,
right here.
in the middle. Yeah. So it's competing with anger management. I think it's an interesting idea, but I don't think it's going to be good in practice. Do you see what I mean? It's going to make.
Would it be
Colossus
good
Smash
for test? Would it be good for test of might, but not good for the actual damage window? Like, how would that even be good?
Yeah, I mean, you would have a much longer Colossus Smash. You can build up a much bigger test of might, but you'll be doing it way less frequently, and you won't be getting any overlaps with test of might and Colossus Smash. I think anger management just does that synergy better. I don't know. I think the only very, very niche situation where you would see someone use Spiteful is if you're sort of ramping up before a big ad burst phase or something. But that probably doesn't exist right now.
Yeah, but at least it's a real option, right? I think what you don't want in any class is like a anger management, and then literally anger management is so good that the next thing could never even be picked in any scenario. So at least adding some spice and it being different enough is good. Dude, this is insane. If you're a warrior player, you've got to be feeling good. This is actually so good.
They reduced the rage cost of Storm's Swords. It's under sweeping strikes. They was plus 30 rage, but it's now plus 20 rage. So Whirlwind would usually cost 70 rage, but will still be 60. 70 felt like a huge chunk, and sometimes a lot of the time you just don't have 70 rage spare. 60 should feel a lot better.
Okay. Does Skull Splitter matter at all? I don't know if you guys were playing that. Is Skull Splitter causing deep wounds to instantly expire matter?
Yeah, no, I don't think that's gonna matter, because I feel like every time you're gonna pick Skull Splitter, you're gonna pick Tide as well.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so they moved the deep wound pop to Skull Splitter and left the Rend on Tide, but instead of having both on Tide, if that makes sense. I think it doesn't make a difference.
Are there anything, before we move off of Arms, is there anything in the bottom of the capstone level of this tree that you feel like still just doesn't really fit or isn't good enough? Just for further, like Arms is in a really good spot, but is there any room for further feedback, or do you feel like you need to play it a bit?
I feel like we've literally never had any use for Dance of Death. It's the left node by under Bladestorm.
Yeah, that's like there's a couple of things like this in the game where it kind of incentivizes you to maybe use your cooldowns when their health is lower, but that just doesn't happen, right?
No, I don't know. Maybe they need to rethink this one.
Okay, so Dance of Death still needs work. What else? It seems like, do you feel like the barrier of entry of Deft Experience and Critical Thinking still makes sense that they are 2 points as opposed to Valor and Victory?
I think so, because Battle Lord as a 1-pointer is actually really, really powerful. But it being realistically a 3-point investment makes more sense.
Yeah, and then Fatality is only 1 away from that as well. You've seen this in other trees, like the Rogue tree does this too, where like it intentionally has 3-point nodes that are not super powerful, but it's just gatekeeping the extremely strong stuff behind it, and it's fine.
Yeah, it's the same with Juggernaut on the right as well. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, hell yeah.
In my opinion.
Okay, officially moving off of arms. Fury Warrior. How do you feel? How do you feel about Fury last patch to this patch?
I think the biggest problem with Fury this patch, in my opinion, and in many other people's opinion, I think, is reckless abandon and crushing blows. You know, we all know the spender generator builds, but reckless abandon and crushing blows makes it so that we regularly use our spender instead. No, sorry, use our generator instead of our spender, even if we are capped on resources.
Oh, no. That is that's actually my biggest issue with Unholy DK currently. Actually, is because like, even though the spec does a lot of damage and it's pretty fun, the fact that at some points you are fighting between two different resources capping, and then it is sometimes correct to overcap on one to do more damage, has always felt wrong in WoW. So that is. I haven't played DPS Warrior in years, and I know that exact feeling, and it fucking sucks.
Yeah. So during a cooldown window, you're swimming in rage. You're probably overcapping hundreds of rage during your cooldown.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So yeah.
That is so brutal.
So I think these changes, I'll let you scroll down there first. Yeah, so these changes are, I think, aimed to address this. They intentionally buffing everything except for Crushing Blow. So the Raging Blow increased damage there is not going to transfer over to Crushing Blow. So
does that actually solve the problem though? Like, does it?
I don't know if it fully solves it. I believe it still is going to be actually optimal to not overcap Rage, but it's going to be such a small difference that even if you play in the old way that we're playing right now, you're not going to notice the difference.
Okay.
But it's a step in the right direction.
Wait, did they even mention that in this? Despite a strong start to Season 1, Fury's performance has fallen behind where we like to see it. We're encouraging build diversity by providing more throughput. So I don't even know if this was even aimed. Well, it seems like it was obviously aimed at the Crushing Blow thing, but they didn't actually mention that.
This does open up for build diversity. The Crushing Blow won't be as dominant.
Where is Fury right now in like raid statistics? Not like every boss, just like 95th percentile. Like looking
I think last time Warcraft logs. Last time WoW had posted on Warcraft logs. The Warcraft logs rankings, Fury was at the rock bottom.
Or are they rock bottom all bosses? I feel like all bosses is always a huge bait. You never learn anything from that. But it's like all bosses, and then just look at like pure single, although the kill time is kind of weird. It's just worse than arms. I think the biggest issue I have with Fury Warrior being below this is all these other classes also have like just as good of AoE. And like, what's another good boss? I guess Razageth there's not a lot of good mythic parsons on Razageth, but I mean, Fury Warrior is just like a class that gets so much more uptime than other people on that fight, so always does pretty well. But even then, it's middle of the pack. Like, it's crazy to think that Fury Warrior. Have you done Mythic Raz yet?
No, we're progressing on it at the moment.
Okay, but like, so you probably see this. You're actually in the best state of mind to answer this question right now. Do you see how much easier you have of a time in P1 than the people around you?
Yeah.
Dude, it's insane.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
It's insane. And it's crazy to think that you are not topping meters because of that. Like, there are literally classes that are beating you on P1 of that fight, and you are like, do you know the Melee Halandris meme with like the dude singing payphone? Like, and then it's like Melee versus ranged Halandris, and then it like goes to the Melee player, and he's like sweating and shit, and then the ranged player is like singing the song. Okay, that is like you. There are classes that are running around not casting for like 30 seconds, and they're doing more single target than you in that phase, which is like, that's
totally right.
That's kind of a problem. Yeah. Okay, so there's single targets being addressed a little bit. Let's see.
So to the main build, if you just sort of add these percentages onto a current log, Fury gets buffed by about 4.5%, which is
pretty good.
Go a long way.
That puts them ahead of every class on this list except for Ret Paladin, just based on averages at 95th percentile. So like that puts them middle to top on a class that's already super tanky and has really easy access to cleave. That's certainly not a terrible spot to be in, especially with arms being able to fill the gap and having like a raid cooldown and all that stuff. I just don't know if we're going to see a like Fury Warrior topping the meters kind of thing. But although, don't you think this is kind of weird? Like, think about next patch. I feel like whoever's going to top meters next patch is just going to be the class who gets a Razageth bow type of item off of the last boss, and then like they're just RNG going to be like the most single target that patch. Like, just weird shit like that. Like, imagine there's like a two-hander like Jathis or the Gavel again, and that's just like a super rare item. Like, you know they're going to do that in this expansion, and then like you just become goated. All right. Any more notes about Fury?
Yeah, big change to anger management. It's not part of these hotfixes here, but if you go back into 10.05 changes, on live, anger management only reduces the cooldown of recklessness, but it'll also reduce the
Oh, it does
cooldown of
Ravager now.
Ravager as well. Yeah, that opens up a possibility for a much better damage profile in M+.
That is very, very cool.
Because you're gonna have a recklessness and Ravager for every single cash pack, pretty much. Maybe multiple times even.
That is very good.
Them nerfing Crushing Blow, because you would lose Crushing Blow if you go anger management. That should help this anger management M+, or maybe you would even use it in raid in AoE.
Does Ravager own? I remember Ravager was kind of like not that great the last time I looked at it, but I'm not sure.
It owns because of Hurricane.
Oh, okay, I see.
Hurricane underneath increases.
Oh, stacking strength. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, and so you're gonna have a higher uptime on that too. Okay, that is a huge change. I feel like I feel like
why it's so strong.
That's not even bad at other things because like you could use it in raid to have burst during certain things, even on the boss as well. Like that's actually just good. Like if you could warrant cleaving a bunch of ads with it, that 30% strength on the boss is also just value, right?
Yep. Yeah. Exactly. When you're popping your cooldowns as Fury, generally. You don't lose any single target. It's just free AoE.
But now you're actually gaining because you're gaining that strength during it as well. I feel like that's because like so many people misunderstand what makes a class good, at least in raid, and a lot of people will before the expansion they focused on how much AoE classes did in their full AoE build, and then how much single target classes did in their single target build. But almost no one before the expansion really thought about what it would look like if people had to do both. And Fury Warrior historically has always been a class that has been able to do both like really easily and not lose a lot of single target to do the other. So classes that are able to get value off of one and still be good at the other are just like so insane, like Assassination Rogue on Razageth compared to like Sub or Outlaw initially. It was just like, would you give up like 5% single target to be able to be like the best ad DPS in the game? Yeah. And that's like what Fury Warrior is. That's their whole class.
But yeah, the biggest problem with Fury in raid, I think it's the problem at least, that there's just one dominant spec. And throughout the raid, you probably swap 2 points around the tree and that's it. You didn't change anything else.
Oh, that's kind of lame.
Yeah. Because the other options are just way weaker.
Is that different now? Like, do you feel like with the change to the Ravager, you could actually realistically see yourself on a more single target focused fight with some ads being able to play the Ravager build?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you already play Ravager on single target with the dominant build, but you'll have Ravager more often with anger management. So, yeah, I think there definitely are bosses where you will make use of it, assuming it's good. But from what I could tell on the PTR, before these latest hotfixes are applied, it does actually feel decent.
Wait, currently, if you were to play Fury on every single boss in Vault of the Incarnates, how many different talent builds would you use throughout every single boss in that raid?
Right now?
Yes.
2.
That is fucking crazy. As a Windwalker,
one AoE and one single target.
I have a different build for every single boss. I feel like that in a way, and I don't know how they create that, right? Because like as a Windwalker, it's because there's just like at the last couple points in your spec tree and in your class tree, there's just like a bunch of really powerful things. But I feel like it's not indicative of a low power level because Fury could be like, damn, we're insane, but we just never change our talents because our best build is so insane. So I guess the real answer to that is that they just need to make the stuff that you're not picking just way more attractive, I guess.
Exactly. That's what I tried to do with the most recent hotfixes we saw.
Okay, what do you think needs the most work here? What is a part of this tree you never explore and you feel like you'd like to, but there's just no reason to?
Well, Onslaught is one of them. They're trying to buff Onslaught. As you can see there, they're increasing the damage by 40%. It generates more rage. The Tenderize below increases the duration of end rage, which can be nice, I guess.
Well, and rage is like up all the time, right? Like I don't know that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just not really that big of a deal. It's more like a QOL thing, I think, kind of thing. It can, I think Tenderize can now, Onslaught can now proc Unbridled Ferocity, so you can proc Recklessness off it. You'll probably see this being used in a pure single target scenario after these buffs. I would need to see Sims to confirm this, but
even then, you feel like it doesn't add a lot to the class. It's kind of boring, right?
It doesn't. It's a little bit boring.
Yeah,
it is.
Well, I mean, okay, I feel like the way it isn't boring is if it's reliably going to trigger recklessness, that'll feel good. But like, I don't know if that's going to be happening often enough to where you're excited about pressing Onslaught. Any final notes on Warrior as a whole? But overall, it seems like you guys are pretty happy. I would be happy if I'm a Warrior DPS. I'm happy.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy. Now, I do have a problem with the class tree for Fury and Arms, actually. There's just one note. If you go to the class tree Thunderous Roar near the bottom left, there's the talent to the left there, Uproar. It reduces the cooldown by 30. But when you pick that talent, it always desyncs from your 1.5s or 45-second cooldowns.
Okay, so the idea of this talent doesn't really make sense, or the cooldown has to be 45 seconds, so it actually lines up with a different set of your cooldowns?
I think so, yeah.
That makes sense. I also want to ask you something about the class tree. At the beginning of this expansion, what did we talk about maybe more than anything else every single time we talked about? The fact that Shockwave is a capstone level talent. And they kept buffing it and buffing it and buffing it until it was something that you would consider. You as a DPS warrior now, a few months into this patch, how do you feel about Shockwave down here?
I still haven't picked it yet. I know that if you pick it, you do lose a fair bit of damage. It's not like the biggest deal. So if your group really needs an AoE stop, you can take it. You lose some execute damage. I think after these changes, though, you really don't want to lose either Wild Strikes or Cruel Strikes, because that's what you're giving up for it.
So Kyrian Spear still feels good? I know this is... Or Spear of Bastion, is this something you're taking all the time?
Spear of Bastion is the best choice in the usual builds, yes.
And it's still because of the crit damage, Elysian Might, right?
Yeah, it's a powerful effect. In my opinion, it's extremely annoying to deal with, to stand inside of the spear to get the crit damage, especially because the spell effect just covers up everything on the floor. In hectic M+ pools, when there are swirlies and AoE effects everywhere, it's hard to find an opportunity to send it.
Dude, fuck Spear. All my homies hate Spear. There was a legendary clip, and I don't know exactly where I could pull it from, but it was from Razageth, and I think it was Trill died to 4 lightning things on the ground in P1, and I watched his VOD, and he was a little bit under the wing, so it was like hard to see anyway, but you legitimately almost could not see these lightning strikes, and it was because it was inside of Kyrian Spear, and it was just the most bullshit way to die. And I feel like it's not that big of a deal anymore. Last expansion, it didn't seem that bad because, Night Fade DKs were existed, and that was so much worse, especially the Defile version. But now I feel like it's actually one of the few things in the game that is really annoying to see visually. So maybe they could just make it like a little more transparent for other people, or maybe even you.
Yeah, us as well. It doesn't need to have such an oppressive spell effect. There's also Piercing Verdict, the other choice down there. That one is never used.
Okay, so maybe a little bit of buff on that, because that's something that I feel like they're probably going to work on more in another patch. Like, this is 10.0.5. I feel like they're really focusing on like major issues. So like Arms Tree was a huge issue. Moonkin Tree was a huge issue. They like moved a ton of stuff. Mistweaver's like so many changes to Mistweaver. I feel like the stuff where it's like, okay, we have a fully functioning spec. They like the way they're playing right now, but hey, there's a few actual choices that are not really choices. What can we do to make those other things more competitive? And that's the thing I'm really going to want to see over the next year, is how many of these dead nodes, is Piercing Verdict still the same way a year from now? Because right, if it is, that would just be a failure, right? Because you're just leaving something there that is intended to be a choice node, or something to even augment Elysian Might and Spear of Bastion just alongside it. And it's just never even remotely a consideration. Then Shockwave is just that incarnate. You're just so much less option down here because of it.
That's it. But also Spear, you could literally replace it with Blood of the Enemy. It would be a way improved version of it, because it's the same thing, kind of.
Oh yeah, weren't we talking about how one other thing we wanted to bring back for Warriors was Lucid Dreams, and just for all 3 specs, it would just be kind of sick to bring back as a class tree thing. I think that would be but Blood of the Enemy sounds insane too, especially because you could be able to combine it with Arms Warrior pop at 30%, right? Just like the old do you remember the Coral Trinket? Using the Coral Trinket crit Blood of the Enemy and Ink Pod popping. That was insane. Insanely fat. Yeah, you could bring that back to Warrior. So hell yeah. Okay, I think I'm gonna move on to some Warlocks. Really love talking to you about this stuff. I think chat already knows and is a big fan, but obviously you shred, and you have a really good stream that people like watching. So people can catch you at Critcake EU on Twitch, right? I think you're streaming right now.
Yes.
If you guys want to check him out, he's on. I'm showing his stream right now. I'll link it in the chat if you guys want to give him a follow. He's a warrior warlord. All right, chat, you guys get to choose. The people I really want to talk to today are Moonkins, God help us all, Warlocks, and Mistweaver. Which one do you guys want to talk to first? Oh, and Disc maybe. Yeah. All right, Warlocks it is. Okay, hello, Warlock gamers.
Yo.
So I basically am just calling to hear about. I heard there were some crazy changes to your all spec, and I'm just wondering how you guys feel about them. So you guys are getting Harvester of Souls damage increased by 25% alongside Reign of Tyranny buffs. What are your all's thoughts?
So I wouldn't look at those. I would look at the other notes.
I know, I'm just fucking with you, dude. I saw your tweet. You tweeted something like, "All right."
My Twitter is only based.
No, your Twitter.
I talk about the crafting cartel.
I believe you believe that.
Your Twitter is Turbo Dobby. I usually see, I'm like, okay. Usually, like, Kalamazi is pretty, like, reasonable about changes. So I'm going to, like, see what the thing is. And THD was like, fucking skull emoji, Blizzard's so fucking stupid, or some shit like that. And then I go over to Kalamazi's Twitter on the exact same thing. And he goes, Harvester buff is a start. Needs a good bit more than that to be competitive. And then he's just like, you know, Reign of Tyranny seems decent. However, it's a good bit behind. Just like very objective and to the point. And THD's just like, everything is pain. Let's go to the actual 10.0.5 notes. I think these are the ones. Or these are the Babby changes. No, these are the actual notes. Okay, so Warlock in this. What do you guys think about Warlock in the first part of this expansion? I know this is probably... Warlock has been in this weird thing of being like underrated and overrated, but I think the biggest jarring thing to the community and why no one can really figure out Warlock's power level is this is the first time in 4 years. When was Emerald Nightmare? Was that like 4.5, 5 years ago? Something like that? This is the first time in like 5 years or so that Warlocks have not been like the best class in the game for a PvE patch. Like obviously they're the best PI. They're really powerful. They're good in Mythic Plus. Like they're not a bad class, but it's just the first time where they haven't been clearly the best in like a really long time. So how have you guys been coping and dealing with that?
I've been riding the bench. It's great, man. Neither of us have killed Razagath yet. Me or THD. It's sick. It is sort of odd because a lot of Warlock utility, like unless you need multiple gateways on a fight or whatever, it's pretty redundant, honestly. Like one lock can bring stones, one lock like Hellstones, one lock and Soulstone. If you need one gateway, it's a one lock thing, right? Barring locks having a really good damage profile on fights or just doing a lot of damage, like this has pretty much been a one Warlock tier on most fights, like barring Kurog maybe. Yeah, I feel like just tuning's not totally on point with certain things, but they're making strides, I guess, to address that at this point.
If there's anything that Warlock can...
I mean, this is like, I feel like this is pretty normal, right? There's usually only one good lock spec at the start of every expansion.
And then, yeah.
And then they have to buff the other two. Like this happened in BFA, this happened in Shadowlands. AF was the only good spec at start of Shadowlands. In BFA, AF was also the only good spec. And then they buffed them. And then they're like, you know,
and then
shaken up in the 0.1.
Buffing them fixes all problems too, because, and this is actually part of the reason why Preservation of Ochre will probably be good for a long time, is that Warlock is, when they eventually buff and keep all the specs in line, Warlock just really benefits from the fact that they have 3 specs that are all good at different things, have a different playstyle, and they've all historically been able to be good. Like, not all classes are created the same, where like not everything is just an RNG high roll, like my class is good this patch. Classes are usually good for a reason because their design is really good, and Warlocks, generally speaking, if there's a type of damage that needs to be done or is important to a fight, Warlocks have a spec that can do that, and that is not true of almost any class in this game. Even other triple DPS specs, outside of maybe Rogue, except they're a melee, so they're obviously much more limited in that way. Just because melee multi-dotting is usually not comparable to ranged, at least spread out. You have, like, even Mage, like, you could, Warlock's 3 specs are more diverse than Mage's 3 specs are in the way that they do damage. So just, that's kind of why they've been so good for so long. This was also the first expansion where, I mean, there was a world first boss killed, like, it was a super high optimization.
I cast it, yeah.
Yeah, this is a super high optimization, but we sat our only Warlock that was in for Kurog to kill that fight, right? Could you have killed it with it? Obviously, we could have, but it's like you're going for an earlier kill, and it was just a damage optimization to swap it. That I don't think that's ever happened in the race where you've sat your only Warlock. Also, this is a raid where we have multiple. 2 of the best players in our guild are both Warlocks, and it just didn't really make sense to play both of them. THD sat for Razagath. It is insane to sit THD on an end boss. That never makes sense. He's one of our best players. But that's just like kind of what tuning was this raid. So definitely very different for Warlocks. What do you guys think about the changes? Do you guys feel like just now with like the couple weeks of buffs that have happened a little bit to each spec, how do you guys feel going into 10.0.5? Because a lot of the changes here I feel like what the meta is at the beginning of 10.5, yes, there will be other changes. I feel like that will largely say what the raid meta could be like in 10.1. So what do you guys think about Warlock right now?
I think that the affliction changes they're doing are really good. They're basically doing the thing that, like, they're removing a talent that was only used because that talent was only there, and the only reason people picked that talent was to get better pathing. So all they did was move a talent there that was actually good, made it a 1-pointer, and then put a different talent in the 2-pointer slot that's like, it's going to net affliction like 4 to 5k DPS single target. So that's going to make affliction probably the best single target spec.
Wait, for all warlocks? How do you feel about that? I feel like that's not as versatile as some of the other specs. Like, I feel like affliction.
Well, it's for single target, right?
Yeah, I understand. I'm just also, does that involve playing Siphon Life?
Of course.
Oh yeah.
You can never escape that button.
Oh man.
I mean, I feel like they're buffing AF in 10.05, and they buffed Destro like a week ago. Destro single target's pretty good now too. Like, when it comes to sims, which aren't like the end all be all at all, Demo's actually the lowest simming spec of Warlock at this point.
I feel like Warlock sims are the biggest bait of all time. Warlock sims are like...
Well, if you want to look at this, you can always just look at Terrace for single target, and yeah, that kind of fucks over Demo with the movement, but I mean, still, Demo is definitely the worst single target spec for Warlock.
I feel like the changes that are coming to AF, they're removing, like what TH said, sort of a half-dead talent in certain spots. They're adding in a conduit from Shadowlands. I said the curse word, but it's actually one of our good conduits, which should help.
Curse word? Wait, do people get triggered when you say conduits?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Wait, really?
Jump scare warning in my video last night when I said conduit, and like, oh yeah.
Dude, I feel like since conduit energy was taken away, people haven't really been re-about it. If you ever say systems, that gets them bad. Like that, dude. If people hear systems, they literally lose their fucking mind. But like, I didn't know conduits were looked back at that.
Also,
poorly.
Another good benefit of the next patch is Affliction actually has a bit better target swapping because they gave us back the old soul swap.
Oh, I remember that. Wait, is that here? Did they? Oh yeah, they did. Yeah. Okay, that is here. Soul swap was in redesigned. That is so fucking sick. That. Oh wait, let me. Oh, I probably can't pull it up, but there is a Mist of Pandaria VOD of the second boss, Fallen Protectors, of a Warlock being completely naked with the black blood of your Saj, whatever, trinket on, and he like topped damage and did like crazy damage on that fight, just by basically utilizing what Soul Swap was.
It's really buggy right now. It doesn't copy like half our dots, and it's really, really buggy right now.
Oh, okay.
Did you know that Corruption makes a 1.5 second fake cast and cancels your channels?
I don't think the tuning is going to change a whole lot in the raid. You might see more AF being played. Like, it's being played a bit more on Sonarth, on Teros, and things. I think it's actually going to be pretty good on Razagath, honestly.
Yes.
Because like it can do similar bursts to Demo, like in like Storm Surge shields. It has good CDs in the fight, better timings in the fight. It's getting a substantial buff.
We actually played AF for a little bit on progression for that exact reason. Just we gave it like 15 pulls to kind of feel it out and see how it would work. And Demo just outperformed it, but you could tell that AF had the setup to be good on it.
Yeah, that was
and since then it's been buffed like 3 times. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, look at heroic logs, right? So like mythic logs of Razagath are terrible to look at because almost none of them are public, and just in general, almost all of the best players that raid mythic do not have public logs. So if you look at heroic, right, which like almost everyone logs their sales, you have a bunch of good players doing this. I mean, Demo and Affy are like right next to each other. Goddamn, Destro's down bad though. Probably just too much movement.
The thing with Destro is like it can't AoE ads at all. If the mobs don't live for 20 seconds, you are not doing any AoE damage.
Yeah. But AF can bring a bit in that fight. Like you literally can't die in that fight as an AF lock either. Phase 1's just trivial. You just drain life when sparks go off and you're back to full.
I will say, I noticed while watching Demonology POV this raid, I feel like they haven't been nearly unkillable as watching Warlocks in the past. Like, it seemed like he actually needed to press personals to not die to things. Is that... Do you guys feel that way as a Demo lock?
A little bit. They took some of our survivability in Soul Link that was a Demo only thing. They made it a universal Warlock trait. They nerfed it a handful of times later in beta and stuff. So like, it's still tanky, but it's not.
I mean, it's still insanely high passive HPS. I mean, usually it's also just I feel like, you know, a healer is probably not going to look at the Warlock over someone else.
True. That's actually really true. But I just definitely noticed times where like Splat would be going out at 80% and he wouldn't have Pact or Unending Resolve up, and he would like call for an external at 90%. And that's like in the past. I mean, Static Charge is kind of a unique ability in that it's just like a one shot if you don't have a personal kind of thing, if you get picked with it. But seeing a Warlock call for an external at 90% health is something that I don't think I've ever seen in my life. Like, that just doesn't happen.
Wild.
That does not happen. Now, obviously, that was with, 405 eye level gear. Like, that's not going to happen to a lot of other people, but that's what I'm used to watching Warlocks in, right? Low eye level, and they never needed it. What's changing with Demo?
Just some quality of life stuff. Basically, the way the spec works is like, okay, so before, when your pet fell stormed, you couldn't press your other fell storm buttons, and there was no indicator on that. So what they did was they made it so that when your pet fell storms, or you force your pet to fell storm using the talents, it puts everything else on cooldown. Because right now you can just have your pet fell storming, and you're going to be spamming the button like a maniac, and it won't go off.
Okay. So
it's a lot of quality of life stuff for Demo there, and then there's also the Demo buff. They want to make that talent actually competitive on single target. The problem is with that talent is it makes your Tyrant a 1.5 cooldown instead of the usual 1 minute it's been the last 2 expansions.
Yeah.
And we have a 2-minute cooldown, and you have a 1.5 and a 2 and a 3. The easiest way to make the spec work is when we use our other talent that makes it 1 minute, and then everything's good. Everything's vibing good. But when it's a 130, nothing lines up. It's like a disaster.
I was actually going to ask you about that. So with mostly Demo getting quality of life changes, the major change from last expansion to this expansion was Tyrant no longer being a roughly 1 minute cooldown, and now is lined up with other big bursty buttons at 3. Demo is still a good class. It's still the best PI in the game, single target. Demo is a solid raid class. Just how do you guys feel gameplay-wise, the change from Demo from last expansion to this one?
I mean, they've made it so that you can't take your cooldown reduction and like the old demonic consumption, which is now called Reign of Tyranny, at the same time. It's like a choice node, and they're on the same node. So that removed a lot of the power of demonologies off the bat, because you couldn't have reduced CDR on Tyrant and the damage amp on it, right? They put it into Nether Portal, which is a 3-minute cooldown, which is like incredibly tedious to set up with any kind of movement whatsoever. It's like doing brain surgery in space on certain fights. It's just ridiculously like annoying, very just tedious. It's hard to set up. It brings a lot of damage. If you scuff it, I mean, like your damage is not good. It's a great PI target, but Demo's become just a bit more like, I don't know. It's major cooldowns are 3 minutes long. Tyrant's like a minute to minute 20, but the damage it brings is very minuscule, which I think is devalued Demo in a lot of spots too. You could have like Demo locks Tyrant every minute and a half in certain spots.
That is what made Demo so good last expansion. Was classes that have super impactful 1 minute cooldowns is so insane in progression. Like, you do not want too many classes in your raid rotating around 3 minute burst windows, because that's just the weirdest thing to line up for, and it doesn't line up with any of the 2 and 1 minute people.
Yeah, it makes PI awkward too, which, like, I mean, you're not gonna hold PI for a minute typically.
Well,
like,
you currently are for Unholy, so I guess it depends on the situation, but that's a difference.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of how it is. Like, the times that Demo has been good, the last 2 expansions, aside from that one time where they buffed something by 100% and it became broken, it has always had 1 minute Tyrant.
Yeah, and like,
so without 1 minute Tyrant, the spec just doesn't flow well, and it causes a lot of problems, especially because one of our cooldowns is 2 minutes, and having a 1.5 and a 2 minute just
okay. So what can they do to change it? What is the besides just a simple reversion, because there's a new talent tree? What do you do to make that the better gameplay version again?
I mean, I think Reign of Tyranny is close enough to being where demonic consumption was without the OP like stamina scaling effects, that you could just like literally desync like Wilfred's and Reign of Tyranny, or sorry, Grand Warlock's design, which is our cooldown reduction, and Reign of Tyranny. Put them on 2 different nodes, so you can take both at the same time to bring that profile back. And you can still tune Reign of Tyranny, like the old decon, around just tuning in numbers in general. But the problem is, like, if you don't take Nether Portal as demonology, like your far left node that makes it really complicated, your single target is abysmal. It's like your level 60, whatever it is. It's just not good. It is so bad. So I mean, I think like Reign of Tyranny needs substantial buffs. Or like you need to desync our CDR and Reign of Tyranny, and that would help a bit, but I think you still need to tune Reign of Tyranny a bit more. The buffs help that are coming in. It's getting buffed, I think, by 2%, like that. It's like 40%, like 2 raw percent per pet, right? Yeah. But it's still not anywhere near where it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, even in pure single target, it's still worse than the other talent.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
And the notes talking about how it's like going to be better in single target. It's not.
It's better than it was, but it's still bad. So.
Yeah, I mean,
so
it
that
got buffed by
so that-
40%, which was 800 DPS.
so that's important feedback for them, right? Where the important feedback would be, okay, the developer note is, hey, we want this to be a better single target talent, so we're buffing it. And then the feedback to them would be, we're glad that you correctly think that it needs this, but that just wasn't enough, right? I mean, it's just a simple continue buffing it kind of thing, if that's even the best thing to...
Yeah, I mean, either continue buffing it or think about a redesign where you create a 1-minute tyrant.
What is Stone Slam detonation?
It's the AoE soak in the last
Oh, is that the meteor? Oh, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because blood DK would cheese it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you just had a the way to deal with the mechanic is bring a tank that removed it from the fight. So, makes sense. Okay, so you guys have talked a lot about Demo and AF. I will say something that's really good about Demo is that it's just one of the few specs in the game that can do excellent AoE with losing very little single target, and I think that's a huge benefit to your class. So assuming they work on other things, I still think it has tremendous value. Affliction doesn't have that benefit, right? Or did they fix that this patch where it seems like Affliction mass AoE means they do 0 single target?
Yeah, so like with the conduit, Focus Malignancy coming back as a talent, it actually like makes Affliction single target pretty strong. The main issue that I have with Affliction single target, like it's fun, it's enjoyable to me, but you have to maintain a 6-second maintenance buff for the entire duration of the fight.
So dog
You
shit.
have to, yeah, like I mean, if it was like going back to Battle of Dagazagalore, Bizarre whatever, with Demo, when it was incredibly OP, you had a 15-second maintenance buff in Explosive Potential, when you could implode and get 1,000,000 haste and just destroy everything, right?
Yeah.
That was 15 seconds and that felt miserable. This is 6 seconds. I believe DK's had a 6-second buff.
Yes, I was just
Yeah,
about to.
man,
I was
they
just about to point out the DK buff. I think it's called like Plague Bearer or something like that, where you had to press Scourge Strike every 5 seconds to have what your disease is, which are doing most of your damage, to do extra damage. And they had a hotfix in the middle of Mythic progression that made it go up to 10, and that massively changed gameplay.
Yeah, I mean that's literally the same one. Ours is you press Malefic Rapture, and for 6 seconds you get 30% dot damage.
The talent's cool. Like I think it's good. It's just I think that
It's just too often.
It needs a quality of life increase. That's all.
Yeah, you want to pool resources like around putting up more dots every 45 seconds, but you have to also keep spending them every 6 seconds to maintain.
It also locks you into a talent option of free raptures in order to actually keep it going.
Yeah, I think you increase the duration of that to like 10-12 seconds, and I think it's more than fine, because it's like with any movement being present on a fight like Teros, just Godspeed. Like, good luck, man. You know?
Also, the AF tree has like some pathing issues right now, because like you want to, like if you're going for like a single target AoE build right now, like Harvester of Souls is a completely dead node. You can never pick it because it's just awful.
That's fucked.
It got buffed by 25%. It's like right in the middle, and like if you want like some weird thing to like open up a bit to get to Drain Soul, you always have to pick Shadow's Embrace.
I've seen a log, like I could link if you wanted. It was a 25 million damage log. Harvester of Souls, it's a 2-point talent, dealt 0.13% of his damage.
That's embarrassing.
0.13. That's
yeah,
like,
and you have to spend, because like you could make the argument that like the early stuff shouldn't be that impactful, and I guess that kind of makes sense. But I mean, it's obviously just and again, it's the same thing as Reign of Tyranny, right? Blizzard correctly predicts that Harvester of Souls is not good enough. They just made the same mistake of not buffing it by even a factor of what it should have been buffed by. Right. So,
you could have buffed it on that log by 500%. It would still not be good.
Well, we saw a buff to Pandemic Invocation, a talent similar to Harvester of Souls, by 400% during the Race to World First. Like,
actually, if you go down like the Pandemic Invocation, it's in the PTR. It's that 1-point talent all the way on the left. That got buffed by 400 and then 20%.
Okay.
Yeah. Like 500% roughly, like that, like 525.
Okay, so Blizzard, huge shout out, Harvester of Souls. Can you actually link me that log so I can show it on my stream? And I feel like that would give a lot of feedback. I guess just how do you guys feel about Destro right now?
I feel like in single target and 2 target, it feels really good. The problem with Destro is when you start getting to like 3 to 5 targets, somewhere around that realm, if the mobs aren't living for more than like 20 seconds, you don't really do meaningful AoE.
Okay.
Like if you are AoEing a pack of like 5+ mobs for 20 seconds, you're actually doing really good AoE.
Yeah,
But if you're doing any less than that, it's all ramp and it's all super haste based.
This is
And
insane.
if you don't get to that point, you just won't do damage.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Yeah, it's a 2-point node.
Yeah, Chad, if you're looking at this Harvester of Souls right here, this is this costs 2 total points in the spec tree that you can't really avoid because of pathing. And on a log where this person did 25 million damage, it did 33k.
You can
It did 95 DPS. I mean, that's pretty good.
That's
For what it's
insane.
worth, like, there's 2 iterations of corruption there. The 8% one's like dot damage ticking. The 0.46 one for corruption, that's when you apply corruption, it does damage.
So you're literally out DPSing
Yes.
Harvester of Souls by applying corruption manually.
Yes.
By a
Yeah,
lot.
like
By
300%,
by more than triple. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is okay, so Harvester of Souls, if there's anything to take away from this, anyone from Blizzard looking at it, Harvester of Souls needs God in the worst way. Okay, and we saw that with Destro, right? Where I think initially people didn't play Destro, but as people started doing higher Mythic plus fortified keys where stuff was actually lasting a long time, Destro started to actually do really, really good, right?
Well, yes, but also
Yeah.
they've buffed Rain of Fire twice by 15% in the last month.
I-
But yeah,
I mean,
it is definitely a good AOE spec for consistent AOE damage on larger pools,
I feel like the
and
answer
even
on
some
the-
tyrannical dungeons, like tyrannical Shadowman and Knockit. It's pretty good.
I feel like the answer to both Demo and Destro, I know you gotta go in a minute here, is like just desyncing Wilfred's or Grand Warlock's design or cooldown reduction from a choice node. Because like Destro, Demo, and AF all have the CDR, every single spec does, but they're all like hybrid nodes. You choose either that or something else. I feel like just desyncing that for every spec makes Warlock like profiles just infinitely better and solve so many problems that we have. Like 3-minute Infernal and 2-minute Infernal, it's like 2 completely different things. It's like a different spec. And like that's I feel like where the issue lies. But Destro's still good, don't get me wrong. It just feels clunky.
Okay, THD, any final notes on Warlock?
I mean, we didn't talk about the Destro. They made Shadowburn apply eradication. Yeah, it applies eradication, and it's affected by Ashen Remains.
I heard,
yeah.
before you talk about Soulkeeper, I did hear that Frank is actually maining Warlock right now, and I believe that no
he's
class
bad.
that Frank ever mains can be any better than average.
Well, that's a lie, because like we're still better than Shadow Priest.
That's fair.
You guys good?
Oh yeah, but besides that, there's like 2 other things they did. They reworked the final capstone in the middle of the class tree, both of them.
Okay.
They made one go from like a 1-hour passive buff to just like a random proc. It's kind of a nerf in that regard because now the fire damage ring procs less for affliction because the other 2 specs do fire damage.
Yeah, it's like a big nerf actually. It's like 2% damage loss. It's pretty rough.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. Maybe look at that one for AF.
That's good.
And only AF because the other 2 specs have baseline fire damage. And then Soulkeeper, it got changed in AoE. They buffed it by like 800%. Don't know if that was intended.
Yo, chat, something else just got changed too. Apparently, when we were talking about Warlocks and we talked about how insane Soulkeeper was going to be, apparently they just pushed a PTR build that nerfed it by 90%. It was 2,800 an hour ago, and now it's 276. And now if you look at the post-nerf version on live, it's actually a DPS loss from the one that's currently even on live. A 10% nerf to that, which was never picked under any circumstances. So fucking get annihilated, Warlock players. In conclusion, things I need to look at. Reign of Tyranny needs to be buffed more, but the idea is right. Harvest of Souls needs God way, way more than it got buffed. What was the other thing? The Affliction Siphon Life needs to be removed from the game, just as another reminder. And then also that maintenance buff that is 5-6 seconds should be made to be longer. And then there was one other thing about, oh yeah, the demo cooldown timings. All the desyncing across all 3 specs is just weird, right?
Just remove Grand Warlock's design from a hybrid node and make it an individual talent choice, so every spec gets access to
Destro
it.
is not as desynced. It's just a 3-minute Infernal, and like realistically, the times Destro has been good has also been when it has had a 2-minute Infernal.
Yeah, 3-minute TDs suck. They're not fun.
Like you gotta remember, right? We've had CDR talents for Warlock for the last 2 expansions, and we've almost just used them forever. Like the best legendary for Demo in Shadowlands was the CDR legendary, which is now that talent, which is now the talent we use. The thing before that is Demo became good before it like had the super busted artifact trait. Demo became good because of Vision of Perfection, which made the cooldown almost a minute.
Yeah. having to choose between CDR or the ability that empowers it makes it bad.
And the same thing happened for Destro with Vision of Perfection. It made it almost a 2-minute Infernal, which made Destro good. And then in Shadowlands, it also ran
Not
the
even just
CDR
good, but
legendary.
also more fun, right? Like there's literally
Yes.
0 fun and desyncing
Right.
cooldowns. Like anytime a class is overcapping resources to do more damage because it's the correct decision, that feels bad. And anytime a class is holding on to a cooldown to line up with a longer cooldown and not sending it, that feels bad. Or sending it knowing it won't line up feels bad. Literally both scenarios are bad feels. So having some cooldown options to be better than that is good. Amen. All right, I gotta call Naguura. She's actually gonna kill me. So thank you, Warlock gamers. I will catch up with you guys in a few weeks after the 0.0.5 changes and see how strong Soulkeeper is.
Sounds good. Thanks,
All
man. I'll
All
talk
right.
to you later.
All right, see you, buds. Oh, what's up, Tettles? All right, I hope Naguura still joins. She is...
Dude, it is so late for her.
It is super late. I told her that I would be ready like 10 minutes ago. Oh,
Hello,
there she is.
Naguura.
Hello. Sorry for keeping you up. Wait, do you normally stay up this late? Are you a DGen?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, good. I don't feel that bad then. I think Moonkins are some of the most interesting people to talk about in this upcoming patch, but also not even talking about the changes, but also just like how your class has played this expansion. Because I feel like there were so many ups and downs going through beta, and like so many random bug fixes that made you just so good. Obviously, your Starfall is different and spammable now. Your class is super good right now. It's a good to great raid class. It is a fucking insane Mythic Plus class, which is cool. And then... Also, you guys have famously, all druids will know this, there was the first class tree ever released, and then as time went on, every other class tree just started looking a little bit more complete, and they learned lessons from the previous ones, and the ones at the end were like incomparably better than the druid one. And then, you know, it was clear they ran out of time, stopped working on it, and it looked like those things just needed help. This patch, they addressed both the Moonkin tree and the class tree a little bit. So basically, I'm just... it's kind of a long conversation. I actually kind of want to get into the changes in a bit, but I just want to hear how you guys have enjoyed playing Moonkin so far this expansion.
I've really enjoyed it. I find it quite fun. It took a while to get online. It's surprisingly gear dependent in a weird way that I haven't seen from classes in a while, at least in my opinion. And then like you also need your 4-set to actually do any damage realistically, because it's like
Oh yeah,
a 15%
no, it's
gain
way
or
too
some
big. You
bullshit.
guys have the biggest 4-piece in the game. The first couple weeks, I do think that's an issue though, because like you never want tier is one of the small, like the biggest forms of borrowed power still in this game. It's actually the biggest.
Yeah.
And you definitely never want too much of your power to come from one thing, because it's going to be super hard to tune you in the upcoming season, right? And imagine being a Moonkin in the first 2 weeks without 4-piece. It was so doomed. Like
It's pretty cursed, yeah.
Yeah.
I found it really fun though. I've had a lot of fun with the changes that they made realistically.
Yeah, so I definitely don't want to think about how it's going to be without 4-piece. I hope they're going to do something about that. But yeah, with the 4-piece, definitely feels like a good class. Like everything feels very, very smooth. I think the whole rotation feels nice. There's some people that complained about the ramp up time, which I 100% understand if you're a person that plays lower keys.
Yeah.
It's going
Yeah,
to
that
feel
makes
bad.
sense.
It's definitely going to feel bad. Otherwise, in high keys, it's of course a lot of fun. If you have the time to put your dots up and to ramp properly, then it feels really good. In the raid, it also feels good, even though our single target I do think is like not great. But we provide a lot of utility. We have lots of good niche things that we can do, so it's good in the raid as well.
I think we benefit heavily from a lot of the raid fights, basically every single fight except for Teros having some form of cleave too, though.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's not even like a this raid thing. Like outside of Sludge Fist, every single like really hard boss in like the history of WoW has had a heavy cleave element. Like all like 98% of them are you need to be able to do both. Even in a situation like Broodkeeper where you guys are technically the best ad killers in the game, not just because you have really good consistent AoE, but because you're also just keeping your dots up on the boss the entire fight while being 60 yards away from it, right? Like you just have you can do things at your class that no one else can do. And you mentioned your utility. I actually think this expansion, Moonkin, this is before the changes. Like just right now, I think Moonkins have even more utility per Moonkin than they had last time. They like you still have the ability to Heart of the Wild heal, super cursed because you have to like do some talent tree shit. But like you have Nature's Vigil during your cooldowns. That shit is good. You have the ability to bring 1 minute roar as one player. You know, I think people are maybe overrating it a little much right now because Sparks on Mythic Razageth, which is like the most niche. I mean, it's very possible the rest of WoW will play out and we will never see a mechanic even remotely close to the requirements that had for like AoE CC. But obviously Druids it's just another thing that they excel at and are really good at. I just think Druids are just such an insane... I'm glad they're good at Mythic Plus because I feel like in Raid, even if they weren't good, you'd still bring them just because of how valuable they are.
Yeah,
for sure. I do think that, like, as you said, the class tree brings like more utility than we had before. I also think even like the changes that they made to the class tree, I don't necessarily... like, I didn't have an issue with the class tree before. Honestly, like I think we've reached almost all of the things that we wanted, unless you wanted like a lot of stuff for and plus. Like if you wanted Cyclone and Hibernate and Typhoon and Vortex, well then maybe that was a bit cursed. But now with the changes, you can get even more, which I do think is really nice. But yeah.
I think that in general, like we never had issues with the class tree. It was the other specs of Druid that had class tree problems, and then we kind of got everything that we were really looking for out of the class tree. Now we just have like 2 bonus points that we can throw around into, you know, a little bit of healing, potentially Cyclone if you really wanted it for whatever reason. It's kind of chill.
How do you guys feel being wanted in Mythic Plus again?
Oh, it feels great. Don't have to play Warlock or another spec.
I actually feel like
Rest of Druid is also really good. So I can play that too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
I feel like this is... I feel like if you are a like WoW player, so like you guys are content creators, so you play WoW all year round. I don't mean like a tourist or a seasonal WoW player. Someone who plays WoW as their main game all year round. I feel like the RNG high roll of your class being great in a Mythic Plus environment. Well, I guess it's not really a high roll for everyone, right? Like rogues are literally always good and stuff like that. But like that actually affects your appreciation of this game so much more. Because doing big dam is fun and being invited to groups is fun. So I feel like your experience with WoW when you are one of those classes is actually much higher. So we're definitely talking to a few people who are riding a high one right now.
The one thing about them, plus, so they obviously changed it now with Solar Beam being like always taken. But the thing is, like even with Solar Beam is this is something that people have forgotten because now we're so happy that we get Solar Beam back, but it's still a bad interrupt for like single target interrupts, right? So I think I noticed.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just want to say that one thing that I noticed playing in Plus, especially without Solar Beam, is that I feel like I don't have much impact on us timing the key or not, which maybe is a good thing because you have less responsibility, right? But then also you can't really help the group out as much as you maybe want. And you just see the cast go through and you want to interrupt and you just can't. And then it's like, oh, well, I guess we wipe.
I feel awful not having Solar Beam, and then I have to move my ass into melee and an in-cap roar. And I'm just like, I'd rather Solar
mobs
Beam.
Can't even be in-cap roared, right? I mean,
yeah.
Are you guys able, with the new changes, are you realistically ever to not fuck yourself and grab Skull Bash as a backup for that exact situation with the reduced points taken in Killer Instincts?
So we were looking at it, but realistically,
definitely do it.
You can definitely now. I don't think you're going to in most situations because you do have Solar Beam. The downside of Skull Bash is that it costs 2 globals. It forces you to shift into form that forces you to walk into like 13-yard range, something like that, something weird, which is possible, but like realistically, it's not something that we're reasonably looking at.
I think once you have Solar Beam, like I know you're down bad on how bad Solar Beam is for a group kick. Or for like a single kick, but like I think Solar Beam is such a fucking good button that like it makes up for that. Like for example, if any class in the game had to choose between having Solar Beam on a 1-minute cooldown without even the reduction versus a solo kick, I mean Solar Beam is fucking turbo insane. The only thing that's more insane than Solar Beam is a dragon healer pressing a oppressive roar right before Sigil of Silence. It's like fucking 14 seconds or something like that. Like it's some ridiculous number of everything being silenced, and they can move while doing it as well. But I mean, Solar Beam is definitely super insane. I don't think you'll want this in the game.
It varies between the worst kick in the game and turbo broken, and there's no in between is the problem with it. But I don't mind.
Yeah, but the in between is you could just spend 2 globals to fucking Skull Bash, which like I know blows, especially with how much ramp and like constant flow your class has in AoE. But like you literally have the option to have both. I feel like it's so good.
Well, I don't think Skull Bash is like an option at all, really. Just because if you take it, like you're never gonna be assigned to interrupt because it's 2 globals, right? So you would only ever be a backup interrupt.
Yeah, but that's exactly what you guys are complaining about. You're like, man, it feels bad to sit here and watch these kicks.
It can't be a backup interrupt because you cannot press it if you're in a G city, right? Like if it's a backup interrupt, in my opinion, needs to be something that you can press whenever.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, with
and
healers
you can't
having
do that with Skull Bash.
with most healers having interrupts right now, it's more or less fine in most situations, anyways.
Except for priests.
Assuming that your healer knows what's going on, right?
Yeah, like if you remove yourself, if you think of last expansion and you remove yourself from being able to kick at all, like you can right now, without being able to take Solar Beam, if you just add the healer kick, which all meta healers have a kick, in place of what you would have done last expansion, Solar Beam's kind of just extra, assuming you have a competent healer. So I think all good on the kick front, although there are a ton of kicks this expansion. So like, you know,
I'm glad to have it. I'm glad to be forced to take it.
Yeah, same. Some people are also complaining that you now have to take it all the time, which I personally think.
Well, I actually was looking at that.
Much better.
So let's actually talk about Solar Beam before we get into a lot of the other changes. So like when I looked at how bad Balanced Druid was, the tree at the beginning of this expansion, what I kept thinking of is Shadow Priest, because Shadow Priest had this exact same issue where their class, now Shadow Priest has its own issues, but Spectre related, I think they brilliantly solved the problem of needing to take Dispersion and Silence in their tree, where if they're taking, you know, all the way down their tree and they get all of the damage points they could possibly want in any scenario, you've only spent 7 points in the beginning, and then you have to pick Dispersion and Silence, or you can pick, if you don't need Silence for the fight, you could take Dispersion and an increased Dispersion. But it doesn't affect their ability to do damage whatsoever to grab any of those. And then the Moonkin one obviously was the opposite of that. Do you feel like they accomplished that with the Moonkin one, or do you still feel like there's some issues with it?
So I definitely think they accomplished it. You have to take Solar Beam now to get further into the tree. Like, you literally cannot go without it.
Yeah, so if you wanted to AoE, for example, you would have to take Solar Beam even in a scenario where you would never want it.
No, you always have to take it, like even on single target, because you cannot advance.
Oh, I see.
without taking it.
It's the same thing as Shadow then. So you just go straight down, I'm just going to pick random talents. If you just go all the way through Stellar Flare and Nature's Balance, you literally cannot spend 8 points without picking it. Okay.
Now
And I think that's good because you never feel bad for taking it, right? Because you always have to, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. People have had this weird complaint now about like Starfall being this weird non-taken thing, and I don't care. Like it is what it is. I think that the Interrupt is definitely the more worrisome one, because you did see not an insignificant amount of people at the high end at least start playing without Solar Beam in a lot of their keys because it was, you know, a 7 or whatever % damage loss.
Which is like, fucking crazy, by the way. Every single one of those people was not greedy. That's an insane decision. And I know, like, everyone wants to shit on Moonkins. I get it. That's like the state that we're at, right? But like, if your class had to pick something extremely valuable that every group wanted, and you had to lose 8% damage, you would definitely not take it and also be complaining just as much, because why would anyone have to make those choices? It's insane. Like, it's definitely viable that they were complaining about this. Same thing with Havoc Demon Hunter. Very similar. I think there's actually another class actually that had a super cringe talent somewhere that they couldn't get. It was enhanced. For enhances before the Winds nerf, you had to play Feral Lunge on Mythic Razagath progression, and you just lost 4k DPS just to hop at the boss, you know, like just shit like that. Like in spec trees, just very blatantly, that stuff does not belong there. Those are not the decisions that 98% of classes have to make when going down their spec tree. Why on earth are there what used to be 3 specs, now I believe just 1, that has to make any decision like that on their tree? It just doesn't make sense. And I still think you guys have an issue with that, right? How much damage do you lose? You guys, I heard from my chat, you guys are running Sims all yesterday and today and fucking whatever, just talking about the tree. What? When are you going to take Light of the Sun?
Fucking, that's a PvP talent, bro. We don't even. I don't look at that talent. That thing's beans.
Exactly. That's kind of my point.
You could probably take it, but yeah.
How much damage do you lose? Do you know?
Not.
Like what? Like think about like a single target AOE build. What is your worst talent? What are you selecting out of to potentially pick Light of the Sun? The funny thing is you probably haven't even thought about that yet, because you really don't want to fucking do that, do you?
Like absolutely fucking not.
Exactly.
Not the builds we were looking at.
So why is that here? Right? Why is that not baked in, or why is that? Yeah, it's like it's still kind of missing the whole point. Like no one's going to spend, even if it's a 2% loss, there's just no fucking way. There's no way you can't do that pack without a 45-second cooldown on this shit. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I view that shit as a PvP thing. I look at some of these talents and I'm like, why are these talents here? And I'm like, maybe somebody's taking this in PvP. I don't know who.
I don't think they do.
I know they don't, but like, I don't know who would be taking this, but maybe it's a PvP thing.
How do you guys feel in general with the new changes? Are Moonkins stronger or weaker starting tomorrow?
Okay, so sim-wise, we're slightly better on AoE, and we're slightly worse on single target.
Okay.
It's not slightly worse, right? Isn't it just the same?
I
think you're saying it's worse in single target if you take the AoE talents, right?
It's the same on specifically... Okay, it's the exact same on specifically Teros, but it's worse whenever you were talented into mixed talents and doing single target damage.
Well, of course, because you're just objectively losing 1 talent, right? Like literally if you have to pick Starfall ever, you just minus 1 talent point from what you had before. It's just more convenient.
Yeah, okay, so basically, because they changed Starfire to now increase our splash damage of Starfire rather than it being more crit, our Starfire is going to do overall more damage, or a bigger percentage of our damage breakdown on AoE is going to be Starfire. And a lot of the death talents that we never took, we can actually take now to have Starfire be a big portion of our damage. And
Okay.
even without those talents, it's still going to be a good spell to press. But if you want to go like all out AoE, then we would lose a lot of single target for doing so. And it would also require us to cast like a lot of Starfires, which is not, I guess, realistic. But if that happens ever, and there's like a huge AoE fight where we just have consistent AoE DPS, then we're actually going to do a lot more damage with the new talents. Which is a bit weird, because we're already really good in consistent AoE. So
they increased our stacked cleave damage a little bit too, and then you saw the nerf that they hit. Was it Friday maybe? To the lunar eclipse changes. We were going to be doing some ridiculous AoE just with Starfire.
Yeah, if you look at this lock right now, before they nerfed Starfire on PTR, it would have been double the amount of damage that Starfall does.
Whoa.
On 8 targets.
Whoa. Okay. So port me to tomorrow. What does your breakdown look like just tomorrow as it is right now? Starfire is like halfway in between Moonfire and Starfall?
I honestly don't know exactly.
Do you have Sims? Hold on, let me pull. I can pull them up somewhere.
This is just like a 4 target council thing, so I'm assuming at like other target counts. Starfire is Starfire capped at all? Like the 8 target shit probably?
No, it's not capped.
I don't think it is. Yeah.
No, it's not capped. I can't find something right now.
Okay, that's fine. But I'm just trying to see. I mean, by the way, I think that's good because like that's just gonna enhance your gameplay, right? Like you're able to fit in more damage besides just spamming Starfall. I feel like that's just better. I think they did a good job of doing that with Wild Mushrooms this expansion too.
There's still a question of like what we're supposed to play for M+ specifically, whether or not we're supposed to play something that's more Starfire caster heavy, because like I mean it is a lot of just like raw casting Starfire, as to whether or not we're supposed to play, you know, Mushrooms or go back into that kind of 10.0 build, because there's like a couple of different builds and we don't exactly know what we're supposed to play talent wise anymore. We probably won't know until, you know, a couple of weeks of testing.
I actually really like that though. I like like that. Cool. I like actually I want to ask you guys a question. So you as Moonkins, I asked this to the other people. Throughout all of Vault of the Incarnates, forget Mythic Plus, how many different talent builds do you use across all 8 bosses?
5?
There's like
that's pretty good.
Okay, so there's quite a lot of different ones, but the thing is we only ever change like
1 or 2 talents.
Points.
Yeah.
That's true with anyone.
A lot of talents that are like small damage gains. It's like between 0.5 and like 1.5. And then we just switch them around a little bit, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty good. That's the experience I've had with Windwalker. Is like Windwalker, you play like a little slightly different build, including class tree on every single fight, I think. But like usually what you're changing is like, you know, the touch of death point into like some Zwen talent or something. Like it's like 1 or 2 things, but at least it's somewhat different. Like I just got done to talking with Fury Warriors and they actually have a single target in AoE build and literally that's it. And what's cool about your all spec is you're saying, man, you know what? Right now, I don't really know what's going to be best. Isn't that like kind of what's sick about this? Because you guys are just going to be able to, that means that there's good choices. And that means that part of the fun you're going to have over the next 2 weeks is probably just figuring that out.
I've honestly been having a ton of fun with this spec just in general and just kind of playing around the way it plays currently. There are some things that I think are going to be problems potentially in the future once we lose our 4-set, but overall, I don't have too many problems. I guess the only weird thing is like our capstones are still just god-awful, but basically our capstones are still untakeable, but if you look up like Orbit Breaker, Sunder Firmament, and then like the Rattle / Starweaver talents, those are just our capstones. We'll just adopt those as our capstones now.
Okay, just all this stuff up here bangs?
The ones that are behind the 2-point nodes all just bang, and then it's like the stuff at the bottom, just the stuff at the very bottom are just all trash.
I wonder if that's intentional, because like obviously they spent so much time making sure that the things that you're taking things with make sense. Like in a way, if all of these things up here are really good, that's probably intentional. And if all these are bad, unless design-wise one of these seems like it should be super transformative and very insane, like this one probably does, it's good that they're all bad, right? What would be terrible is if one of them was insane, the other 2 is bad. Because really the decision you're making is between these 3 things. You're not really, I mean, I guess you're technically choosing between like Radiant Moonlight and something like Astral Communion or Sundered Firmament, because, you know, that point can just go up here after you've already passed past it. But yeah, I mean, I think you're one of the only trees where that's true, by the way. I think almost all trees in the game currently are, like, their best stuff is pretty much near the bottom of the spec tree, or at least one of them is. What did it look like last patch? Let me get like a side by side. I think it's like a totally different looking tree, right? Dude, they did the same. Do you think they did that on purpose?
That he used to look like an owl? Yeah, probably.
I think so. Look at the demo lock one. The demo lock one looks like it looks like a skull. It looks like a skull, like very clearly.
Oh my god, it does look like a skull.
Yeah, and the Windwalker one looks just like Cartman from South Park. Okay, Old Balance and okay, so this looks very different. I mean, obviously the top is different, but like, what about the capstone situation? Is it just as bad in both? Oh, dude, it's so different.
The capstone situation is pretty beans in both, though. Like, you don't take many of the
Can you
capstones.
actually just link me like what your general build looks like with the new tree, and then let me just see like what the pathing looks like. This doesn't have to be long at all. Just like you could literally just link me a completed one. Okay, so right here. Oh yeah, see, this looks weird. I feel like any class in the game just not getting any of their 3 capstones just seems wrong. This is obviously like an AoE build, right? Mushrooms and.
I have a question, Naguura. Are you gonna play
Never
that in
taken one
M+?
No, I mean, I just randomly had this open. This is
Oh, okay.
probably an M+ build, but I would play Retzel, I guess, rather than Starweaver. So this whole like Starfire meme thing, I think it's good that we have it now, that you can go like full out Starfire builds. But I do think realistically, we're probably just gonna play the same, like a very similar build to what we did, like what we do right now.
Wait, do you guys like that though? Because I feel like Moonkin this expansion plays very different than Moonkin previously. I think it's like a little bit more skill intensive, right? I think that's what some people were saying.
Canex has described it perfectly whenever he said, we min-max the most stupid shit for 0.2% DPS sometimes, which is, it is way more complicated than it has been in the past, but it's still
But for very little
fairly
gain.
straightforward.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, if you had the choice between doing insane damage and it's really easy versus doing insane damage and it's really hard, you perform better with the easy one, but the hard one probably makes you feel better about what you're doing. It's more replayable. Like, for example, if you were to look at 2 classes, let's just take Moonkin right now, and let's just say a version of Moonkin does 5% more damage, but all you do is spam literally 1 spell for minutes, like you're in TBC. Which one would you rather have? I think, like, the most insane Parse Lord would say just the one that does more damage, which is super degenerate, but you would stop playing that class in 5 seconds. Like, you'd play it for 2 days and then log off forever.
It would not be fun.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like your class being more intricate, even if it feels like you're doing it for no reason, it adds so much replayability and like intricacy in when you're playing it. Love that.
Yeah, I definitely like it. Also, I think this, I'm not 100% sure, but I think my tinfoil hat theory is that they're buffing the whole Starfire build, because a lot of like more casual players think it's too complicated, especially the Stellar Flare thing. People hate it. Like, people hate dotting all of the mobs of Stellar Flare. So they would rather just sit there and cast Starfire. And I think that's the reason why they changed it.
I got terrible news for those people.
Is Moonkin a like casually played class a lot? I feel like Moonkin is like not what a casual player would play. They would play like a priest or a hunter.
There's so many Moonkin players. Like,
there are a lot
I don't know
of Moonkin
why.
players.
There's so many people that play Moonkin.
Well, probably because it was just fodder for like an entire expansion. That always happens. Did you notice that with tanks? Like back in the day when people thought Brewmasters were like just the best tank, and they would just say like random bingo board sayings like, yeah, stagger is good for progression, and not really understanding really like how much extra healing they needed. They just casuals for a while were just like, you just play a monk. And then like you saw even after they were OP, so many groups just had 1 or 2 Brewmaster monks for years because of that perception initially. And then they just chose their main and never swapped off of it because it was never really bad. And like, that's kind of how Moonkins are now. I think like Moonkins were super, super insane in season 1 of Shadowlands, super good in season 2, and then they were fine at the end, right? But like, I think that perception is still going to play for a while. Like, people have just gotten used to playing Moonkin.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I guess there's also a lot of like content creators that play Moonkin, which maybe
That's
influences
true.
some people's.
Why is that? Like, if you look at it, like tanks kind of play everything. So there's like a little section of tank content creators. There's a little section of healer content creators, except they're usually a little bit more class specific. And then like, if you look at like the individual DPS specs, there's like more Moonkin content creators than there are Warlocks, and there's 3 specs of Warlock. And then there's more Moonkin content creators than there are of like Mage content creators. It's so weird.
Yeah.
It's probably just RNG. Like, just multiple Moonkins just happened to like be content creators, but I'm pretty sure per player base, you just have the most content creators in specific for whatever reason. But also Moonkin's kind of a sick class, so it's not a class you usually reroll off of.
I think it's something about the Druid fantasy. It just kind of keeps you tied to it.
What other changes
It's like
besides
full moon and convoke.
what other
I'm in.
changes besides the class tree did you guys get here? Like, is there any like buffs to individual spells besides the Starfire thing that you're looking forward to?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you go.
They removed a Circle of Life and Death and changed it to Cosmic Rapidity. And so basically what Circle of Life and Death used to do before is it would force us to redot more frequently. And so it would,
cringe.
It was really cringe. And then they changed it to be like the good version of how that reads.
Yeah, exactly. The DKs have the same thing.
Of the dots. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's sick. I'm so thankful for that one. Good change.
Okay, so just a nice quality of lifer. Umbral Intensity, that's the Starfire thing. Astral Communion, passive effect.
One more thing about Starfire, which I don't know if you noticed, but at the moment, Moonkins on single target enter Lunar Eclipse and then cast Wrath inside Lunar Eclipse. And in the next patch, it doesn't actually change, so we still do the same thing.
Oh, that's a
which
problem.
Is the most confusing thing.
Yeah,
to,
it's
like,
super
casual
confusing.
People. Like so many people don't
I
get
bet-
it.
It doesn't
It
make
makes no
I
sense.
bet if Blizzard knew that right now, that would be the singular first thing they would change. Because one thing that they've targeted more than anything else, and you actually just nailed it, is anytime casuals are confused about what to press, they want to fix that immediately.
They've tried to fix it 3 times
yeah.
and they still have failed.
Yeah.
I mean, they're completely reworking our Lunar Eclipse because of it, and it's still you're still going in
That's
Lunar
so
Eclipse.
funny. Oh man, it's okay. Well, okay. At least the good thing is, at least they know it's a problem because they're trying to fix it. Obviously, it sucks that they haven't fixed it yet, but like, at least they know that it is a problem. So I assume if it continues to be one, which you guys know it will be, but once they know that, then hopefully they once and for all fix that. They did the same thing with Fury Warrior with the crushing blow thing. There's I don't know if you guys probably don't play Fury Warrior at all, but they at max rage are just generating rage with multiple spells. It is so cursed. I think that is among the worst feeling of any DPS spec. Any single time, every single class in WoW, and they do this better than any other game, has like the best feeling of like generating one resource and spending another with like a mix of your cooldowns. Like that's like what makes a WoW DPS class and why it's so easy to swap around to different ones, because that same concept always applies. Whenever you run into a class that disregards the generating or proper spending of resources and just spams something at full energy, it's the worst feeling ever.
We used to do that.
We were running some sims earlier about only pressing Starfire and dots and foregoing literally everything else, and then they nerfed us on Friday, and so I was like, oh, thank fucking God.
Yeah, that would have been pretty. Because the thing is like people will like it because it's OP, but things that are OP and not fun have a very short shelf life, like historically. But the thing is most things that are good because their design is great. So like that doesn't usually happen, but yeah, that would be very bad.
This one time where we would only cast Moonfire.
And that time after that we only casted Moonfire.
Wait, let me see some of these sims of only spamming Starfire that they nerfed. I need to see this.
I don't have them anywhere.
Well, someone
I
said
have
Goop had them. I don't know
those.
if he's still around. He was in here earlier.
Yeah, he probably does have
Oh,
them
Dad,
somewhere.
remember the Dad build last expansion?
That was Legion, but yeah.
Or was it
that
Legion?
sick.
Yeah.
Apparently there's a build now that's like really close that you play Weaver and you only cast Starfall. I don't know how close it is. I'd have to look at it later.
I kind of like
There's
that you guys are close to playing a few things like that. Like, even though they're cringe, the fact that you have like different builds based on the scenario. Like, if you ever have a
That
fight
one's
with full
certainly
movement.
not bad. That one is certainly not bad.
Oh.
Compared to some of the other shit that we do. Just Starfall, perma, and then you use your procs on the Star Surge.
Yeah, but like I feel like that's insane for movement. Like if there's a high movement fight, having the option to do something like that is cool. But if you ever can stand still, if that's better, then that's a problem. Oh, this is the sim?
This is before the nerf Starfire.
Is this
though.
AoE or single target?
It's
It's I think 8 targets.
I think it's
eight-
8 targets.
8
yeah.
targets perma and Starfire. Wow,
We didn't. Yeah.
that's a lot.
We didn't Starfire only, but then that had the question of, are we supposed to be Starfiring only? Then they nerfed us a couple hours later. We're like,
Yeah,
oh,
or
God.
should you even spend astral power? Should you just
Yeah.
only Starfire? Probably do,
Yeah.
because a lot of it's
We're good.
passive. But yeah, that's
now
that's
it's
insane.
way better.
Are you guys one of the classes who's playing a cringe 372 trinket?
Nah.
Oh, you're not. Okay.
The Iridius Fragment is actually very good for us for an incredibly long time, but you have way better trinket options. I know that there were some instant dollars moonkins that were playing like Iridius Fragment on their prog, but it was because they didn't have like Icon and
Yeah,
some of
well,
the better
Icon's super
options.
goated. Yeah.
What-
The thing that I find interesting is the balance between those things existing versus not existing. Like, for example, you guys have heard the like very casual takes of like, man, I miss it when like random world boss trinkets would just be good for the whole expansion, like in BC and shit like that, which then like obviously anyone who played with Arcano Crystal knows that that's just complete dog shit. And like sometimes it's kind of cool that like expansion or raids that drop other things like Font of Power, Coral, Ink Pod, things like that can last into a new raid is cool. But I've always wondered how cool that is when you balance it with the fact that like people's eye level, does it suck when you're using a trinket and your eye level is lower than it actually is because you just have like a 50 eye level lower trinket? I think some people actually care about that, and it's really annoying.
I kind of find it annoying, but like at the same point, it's faster for me to farm out my trinket as opposed to having to go and farm 55 runs for Whetstone on Razagath. That was cool. I played Whetstone on Razagath. That is our best trinket on that boss.
I still don't have a Whetstone on my Windwalker. There's just 15 items that drop in that dungeon, and I've just accepted that I'm never gonna see it unless it's in my vault. All good.
For the record, it's only good for Moonkin on like pure single target or like weird damage amps like Razagath Mythic. But so like you should not go farm this if you're paying attention. But like, it's not bad for some fucking reason.
Okay, that's about just basically how you guys feeling. So Moonkin community in general happy with the changes, and you guys are looking forward to 10.0.5.
It's a slight upgrade, I think, is the general sentiment.
Yeah, but you guys are
for most
already
people.
sick. You
Yeah,
gotta be
it's
pretty happy.
definitely-
Your class is
It's
insane.
definitely good.
I don't think it needs to be nerfed, but I think your class is really, really good. And you should be
I'm
happy
not
about
looking
that.
forward to Starfire spamming though, because Starfire is a long cast. Well, it's not as long as like a Pyro or whatever,
Ooh,
but it's still long.
true.
And there's a lot of like swirlies where you cannot finish your cast in M+, right? So that's gonna be annoying.
You think we're gonna play it in M+? That Starfire
Well, I
build?
mean, no, but even if you don't play the full Starfire build, you still cast Starfire more, right?
Yeah, that's true. There are some people who are saying that we probably should play that full Starfire build, or they're at least gonna fuck around with it, the whole entire thing. Because it sims higher than everything else.
I don't know. I don't think so, but we'll see.
I don't know.
Here's
either.
what I think's happening next patch. This has been my tinfoil for a couple days. The Hunter Bow was like super insane off the last boss, and I think they're going to continue to have some kind of Gavel, Hunter Bow, Jathis level weapon off of the last boss. I think because the community in general is down bad on caster damage right now, even though a few are very good, and they think that melee does too much damage, I think there's going to be a caster weapon off of the last boss next year, and casters are just going to fucking reign supreme a couple months into the patch once they all have it.
Oh my gosh,
Let's
you're
do
hyping me
it.
up already.
That's my
I'm in.
that's my foil, and I'm sticking to it.
I'm fucking down for that.
All right. Thanks for talking to me, guys. That was really good.
right.
I'm gonna
GG's,
I'm gonna
man.
ask you guys in a couple weeks how you guys feel like it went, because I feel like you guys will be really interesting to talk to, because you'll actually like probably have a different idea and be playing a different build than what you're talking about now in a couple weeks, and I think that's really cool.
Almost certainly.
Yeah. Fuck
Yeah.
yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. Hello.
Hey.
Hey, so it's been a while since we talked about the old Mistweaver. It was a little bit before the expansion. I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about the 10.0.5 changes, because I think you got more than like almost anyone.
Yeah, we got quite a bit.
You got quite a bit, and I know you were high on Mistweaver coming to this expansion. I think they're definitely good. They're actually much better in raid, I think, than people give them credit for. And you've probably done a lot of Mythic Plus. So you'll have a lot of experience there. I just want to ask you what has your experience been like playing Mistweaver so far since the launch of the expansion?
When it comes to community perception, things haven't really changed. It might have even got worse, but I've been having a blast with it. Like, this is the most fun version of Monk that I've ever played. It's kind of like Melee Disc Priest, which has been super fun. Numerically, the buff that we got like last week or week before that, the last tuning cycle we got, definitely helped a lot with damage and with some of the more maintenance-sided healing things. If I could ask for anything, I would just have them buff Vivify Cleave a little bit more, because it's a lot of setup to spread all the hots out and get everything ready, only for the numbers to be a little lackluster on that side of things. But like in cooldowns, it feels very strong. When we have time to kind of plan out the cooldowns, it's great, but we don't really have a panic button. But that is going to be fixed coming into 10.0.5, I believe. But overall, very happy with the state of things.
Dude, I don't even know where to start. Like, I'm trying to like look at like Mistweaver. There's actually like 3 paragraphs of changes. Also, I feel like one thing that Mistweaver doesn't get enough credit for right now is like you guys crank damage, and especially like stacked up AoE. and it's
Yeah.
actually fun to play, right?
It's so much fun. I don't think that I've ever had so much fun playing Mistweaver, and I don't think I've ever had as much fun playing the game as I have recently.
That's true with almost
So-
everyone. The expansion hard owns.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that, yeah, I think Mistweaver had like the insane design going in, and then just like they undertuned it a bit. Like I don't even think like if you just look at just like random like mythic statistics, like they're fine. Like they do good healing, they do good damage. Like the top damage healer on a boss like Council, like they're just a good healer. And even then, like it's not like any other spec of Monk and Raid is super powerful. I think Brewmaster's ramping really hard in the patch, and I think Windwalker kind of fell off a little bit after the beginning of the expansion. So it's like it's not even like they're a bad option for a raid spot really. So I think you might see them with these changes. Like in general, like are the changes, do you feel like buffing their power level, or is a lot of it quality of life?
Mix of both. For Phaeline and all of the like the Night Fae themed things, there was a lot of quality of life changes that don't really affect our power, but they make it a little bit easier to get good use out of it. And then we have things like Shaylan's is returning, the Legion artifact weapon is making a comeback, as well as a new interaction between the Rising Mists that are procced from Rapid Diffusion that will now be extended through Rising Mist. So that's a pretty big deal in Raid because it allows us to blanket people easier with our HOTS. Less of a big deal in Keys, but it's still nice. But Shaylan's, I think, is much more of a power amp than it is quality of life, mainly because it kind of fills the need for the panic button, the oh shit button that we don't have right now.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you a bit about how they feel about healing in Mythic Plus, because it'll get buffed in Raid, but currently Mistweaver is the like poster child of we surround this healer with other healers that can fill niche roles, like certainly super targeted healing, or healers that have like massive, Resto Druid, Disc Priest, Preservation Evoker level ramps, as well as, I mean, obviously Mistweaver still has a strong like a big burst healing profile, but they're the poster child of raid health go up. Like a perfect fight for Mistweaver is just everyone's constantly ticking every 0.1 seconds for a certain amount of damage, right? Like, and but they fill that role, and that's good. I think some of the biggest criticism of Mistweaver so far has been how it feels to target heal certain classes in high level like fortified or tyrannical grievous keys in keys. How do you feel like it stacks up compared to other healers, as I'm assuming you've played it a lot?
We definitely have had more issues in Pugs lately. Like Shadowlands, if we're looking back, we had tons of throughput. We had so many tools to cover other people's mistakes, and it didn't really punish us that hard because it wasn't like we were giving up damage in Shadowlands because we did no damage. So we had the freedom to kind of babysit people. Whereas now it is much more like Disc Priest, where if people are making mistakes and they're taking extra damage, we're
fall behind.
definitely punished for it. Yeah, like that makes a really big difference. We can still make up for it, but it's definitely a lot worse for our mana than it was in previous expansions. So we have a lot of good tools, but it definitely shines in a more organized situation.
Okay. All right. So I guess just kind of you kind of started going through before. You want revival healing was increased
Yes.
while not in raid. I think that's a big thing to help your falling behind. It's a better oh shit button, right?
Yes, that is a big change, honestly. Like when we didn't run a lot of mastery previously, revival felt turbo as like it was one of the worst things you could do because it was actually like an HPS loss in 5-mans, which is really terrible because it's a 3-minute.
Oh yeah.
But now it definitely gives us a little bit more coverage for things like that. We still will use it for a massive spell probably more often than not, just because we've been able to adjust to not having that button, but it definitely gives us a little bit more of a group coverage for AoE, especially when we can't be in melee.
Yeah, and I'm seeing this now as well. Like, obviously the Rising Mist extension, but specifically, this is, I assume, the same thing for Windwalker, where you get, like, the buff to your, I'm assuming, healing, just like you do damage while being inside of Phaeline Stomp. But you're saying that this now makes it so you will keep that buff after moving out of it, just so you have more coverage and it's not as positional based?
Yeah, so we won't have to be in our Phaeline all of the time. We still have to be in it to fish for the resets, which is important. But if you have to step out for, Sanguine or some other ground effect, there's a frontal, you're not going to miss out on the cleave that we get from it. Or the Awakened Phaeline is the AoE aspect of it. We're not going to lose that. So that buff, those two buffs will linger a little bit now, but we still are going to be aiming to be in it quite a bit. It is just like a nice little quality of life thing.
I don't even think it's really little. Like, I think it's actually huge. Like, I'm sure you still want to be in it and fish for resets. I'm just saying, like, sometimes you get that reset early, and then having the ability to move around is insane. Like you raid right now, right?
Yeah.
How far are you into the raid?
We're on Broodkeeper.
You're on Broodkeeper.
We
Okay,
just started like yesterday.
so did you play Phaeline on bosses like Senarth and Dathia, stuff like that?
So yeah, so for raid we take the first Phaeline trait, just like the base stomp, but we only run Ancient Concordance and Awakened Phaeline on Council.
Okay, just because you can stay stacked more often. Okay, that makes sense, because I have tried to run Phaeline Stomp on a few of those fights, and it was an absolute fucking nightmare, and I was wondering how annoying it would be for a healer to do that, and the answer is you just kind of don't, which makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
with just the main trait, you don't have to actually stand in it outside of getting the resets. You're just using it to trigger your Ancient Teachings,
All right, cool.
and you'll swap that back and forth with
Oh,
Essence
speaking of which, I loved Teachings of the Monastery as Windwalker this expansion. I actually think it's one of the like better class design things they've added. How has that felt for Mistweaver?
We've had that. That's I think always been.
Oh yeah, we
thing. I
stole
don't
it
know
from
if
you.
Drew
Yeah,
has. Yeah.
big steal.
It is nice though with some of the other Phaeline traits like Ancient Concordance and the Awakened Phaeline will make our Tiger Palm strike twice, so we get 2 stacks out of 1 button. So that makes our GGs a lot better.
Does Zen Pulse matter?
It's all right. It's not a bad button. It's gonna get better, but I still don't know if I'm gonna take it because it's pretty finicky with actually casting it.
So I'm assuming with like the damage and healing increase of that, they basically just did that so it was more competitive because you weren't taking it, and now it's still kind of just whatever.
Yeah, it's just kind of a hassle sometimes.
How do you feel like the artifact coming back will help you?
It's going to allow us to cover, kind of like Revival does, like the oh shit button. It'll allow us to have big burst healing on 3 people. I'm not
what's the cooldown
entirely
on
sure
that?
if it's smart. I don't think there's a hard cooldown. It's just based off of how many clouds you can get while in combat, because you build the stacks in combat.
Okay.
I don't think there's actually like a cooldown on
Well,
the
that's like
ability
that's like a
itself, though.
perfect oh shit button then, right? Because like you
Yeah.
have full creativity over when to unleash it, and it's kind of always being generated. That's like really insane. I actually
And then we can hold on to the cloud stacks too. I think it's a minute outside of combat before they drop off, so it'll carry over from pack to pack if you don't
okay.
end up using it.
Yeah, if you go into I mean, you're talking about the biggest issue is falling behind. Imagine going into a pack like the pre-nerf Ruby life pool AoE packs, and you start falling behind early. Having something like that without having to use, it's just another button to use just in case something's going wrong to not have everyone die. That's good.
Yeah, and it procs our mastery, which we're running in keys. We're running quite a bit of mastery anyway, so that's another little helpful interaction.
Where is this talent? Is it like a capstone level investment?
So it's actually replacing Bone Dust Brew. We have that, and only PvPers use it, I believe. And there's like one super niche situation where we've taken it in keys, and that is Herja. But Shaylens is going to do a lot better at covering that.
Okay. Yeah, that is
So it replaces it down.
yeah,
kind
I
of towards
see
the
it.
bottom.
Yeah, in the bottom right. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I mean, Bone Dust, I don't know how Bone Dust played for Mistweaver. It's definitely a little cringe. I actually haven't minded it as much as Windwalker this expansion. I don't know whether it's because you don't just spam spinning Critcake mindlessly while it's up, or because it is not like procking every fucking 5 seconds with the legendary, but for whatever reason, I haven't minded it. What is Xiaohao's lesson? That's a choice note under the Shailen's gift. Okay,
Yeah.
never mind.
That one I was really looking forward to, but it came out that we actually can't control which buff we get. It's just completely random, and that kind of makes it dead on arrival. Like, they keep buffing it, but it's not going to be better than Veil if we can't control what we get, unfortunately.
Where's this burst of life talent?
It is over on the far left, outside, like right above Phaeline.
Okay.
It should be a choice node with Calming Coalescence.
You think that's usable?
I think that 20 seconds of cooldown reduction for almost cutting an ability in half in terms of usefulness, I don't personally like it. I could see it being used on Herja, but giving up 40% absorb on something that's already a little weak, I'm not a big fan of.
I feel like the idea is like you take this talent when you think Monk Bubble is irrelevant, and you basically are taking it just for the last sentence of burst healing 3 people, and you're basically just using it for the 3-second burst heal, and the reason it's so small is so it can reliably proc, which is definitely interesting.
Like, it might have some situations, like, I think Halls is probably the only place I'd use it on Fenrir and Herja, but even then it might not even be worth it.
So I think one of the fattest things for Raid probably is your Yulon is now the definitely less Innervate reliant, I guess, or at least the in-between uses. Do you feel like that's usable?
It's definitely something we've been looking at. I prefer Chi-Ji in every form of content, but Yulon has been kind of the go-to for a while. We're using Chi-Ji right now.
Help
but...
a monk noob. So Yulon is the dragon that does the big
Yes.
burst enveloping mist spam, and the Chi-Ji is the very mana efficient one, correct?
Yes, but Chi-Ji also has I think that Chi-Ji is probably burstier than Yulon is when there's more than one target. But Chi-Ji requires you to punch stuff to get value out of it. Yulon does not.
Yeah, but that's fun. That's probably why you play
Yeah,
it.
it's fun.
Punching.
That's the good
if
part.
you're playing a Mistweaver and you don't like punching stuff, what are you doing? That is literally the whole point.
Exactly.
Okay. Got it. And then, so just looking down at the bottom, Bone Dust removed, Attenuation removed, Bountiful Brew. Okay, so kind of gone over most of the changes. Is there anything important you think we're missing? I think there was a couple other, they got a couple other buffs outside of the main post. Like yesterday, for example, they made Lessons of Despair give you crit above 50 instead of 80. I don't know if that's something you were using.
So that's that's part of Xiaohao's lessons. That's one of the new
Oh, right
new talents we're getting. They keep buffing the lessons, and they're all good. Like there's not a bad effect there, but if you can't control which one you're getting, like for example, again, Hersha, I would take the DR every time, but it's a 1 in 4 chance, so I can't rely on that if we're pushing, right? That's not a good enough. Those aren't good enough odds to rely on that every time.
Wait, isn't the critical strike by 30% absolutely fucking insane?
If you get it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but that's like insane though. That's a 30-second buff of 30% crit. That is a fucking insane. But yeah, you can't target it, so it's just like roll the bones. And then wait, are any of them dog shit? Let's see.
I don't think that there's any of them that are bad.
All of them actually seem really good, except maybe Lessons of Doubt based on the scenario won't feel great, but it also is gonna like be so good if people are low. Oh, dude, that's actually sick. I didn't even read these. These are all crazy.
I would like them to allow us to control it somehow. When I first read the tooltip for Shaylands, I thought that we would be able to pick our buff based on the number of clouds that we spent, but it's actually the duration that is.
That would be like Chi
relevant
Explosion.
for.
That'd be insane.
Yeah, I would like if they would make that change, but they might have to make some other adjustments.
I mean, you could also maybe turn it into like blessings on Paladin, and you could have it rotate between them, so you have some control of when you're using one of them. Right, like if you know a big one was coming up, if you had the damage taken reduction and the haste increase, you could hold on to this for a few seconds until like the storm on Hersha, and then like so maybe something like that. Okay, very cool.
Yeah, even like Secret Infusion, it could also work like that. Just if you use a certain ability, you'll get this buff each time. I don't know how it would work specifically because of the deal with the clouds and the stacks, but I think there's a way to make it usable.
Okay, I think we're pretty much good, other than I just don't know if there's any weird class tree stuff. Do you also kind of dislike the monk class tree a little bit?
I liked it a lot when we first got it, but then
Same.
I feel like I'm missing a couple of points here and there.
Me too. Yeah.
Not taking a capstone feels kind of bad.
Yeah, and they're all like so uninteresting too. It's like,
yeah,
especially like Summon White Tiger statue is just the epitome of non-interesting. It's just
so bad.
It's so bad, but like at least Windwalker in a lot of cases you take it just because it's like it just gives you damage and another point doesn't. But it's like the worst feeling GCD of all time, especially as you're like trying to pop your CDs. You feel obligated as a monk to spend so many points just grabbing raid buffs, like just the having to go through as one class and grab whatever down here and get both generous, poor, and close to heart, right? Because like both of those are insane. Some less so in small content, but in raids like they're both required. And then like you also are expected to like go down and grab like, and bounce back like doesn't really work or something like that. Like
it's kind of bad. Yeah, it sounds really good, and I did run it before, but it just doesn't do enough.
Yeah, it just doesn't do enough. Okay, so that's basically it. Any final thoughts on Mistweaver so you can get back to doing some keys?
Oh, I'm in LFG.
Right now you're just gaming. Oh yeah, you're literally in LFG right now. Is it hard to get invited as a Mistweaver above 20?
Yeah, unless I know someone.
Even if you're a famous streamer, you're telling me you can't get invited to a 22. Okay, you should try what I do. What I do is I sign up to groups and I just say in the note, my score is low, but I bang, and I get invited like every time. Yeah, they appreciate the confidence.
I don't invite people like that because I feel like they're lying to me.
What? I'm not lying though. Okay, whatever. I'll let you go. Thank you for talking to me about this. I think Mistweaver is actually underappreciated at the moment.
Oh yeah.
Because it's one of the coolest specs to play, but just because of community perception and also just underplaying it right now, and admittedly some obvious very big burst healing issues in Mythic Plus where it's being avoided to where people aren't really able to appreciate it. I think this is one of those classes where like later this expansion, people will be like, damn, Mistweaver's insane right now. Not even good wise, just like I love playing this class, and hopefully it's good enough at one point in the expansion, or maybe after these buffs, to where people really start playing it and get to know that. I think that would be really, really cool. So thanks for
I'd love to see that.
thanks for the insight. That's very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, good luck in your keys. All right, chat. Do we talk to Shadow Priests? Are Shadow Priests like still upset? Only if it's Franck? Dude, Franck is so dobby, dude. I think Shadow's a good class. People are too dobby about Shadow Priest. At least power level. I have no idea about the gameplay. But if you count PI and there's more than one target on a fight, they're pretty good. What did you say? Dude, Shadow Priest on single target is dumpster sludge. What a fucking... Wait, is it actually though? Let's see. Taros. I mean, it's definitely not sludge. Like Taros Mythic, I don't know about kill time on this fight, but if you add a PI, someone make up a number. How much damage does the best PI in the game right now gain over an entire fight with PI? If you're it's Unholy, right? How much damage does Unholy gain on an entire fight from getting PI'd? 10k? 10? Okay, Atlas said 10.5k DPS. Okay, so assuming there's not multiple priests in your raid and there's not enough Unholy DKs, so assuming you as a Shadow Priest are buffing the best PI target in the game, if you add 10k DPS to Shadow Priest on pure single target, they are tied with the best single target in the game as far as total raid DPS added, if not slightly ahead of them. Now, let's just assume that your guild doesn't have 2 to 3 Unholy DKs, so your PI is actually not going on them and they're going on someone like a Demo Lock or an Arcane Mage, or like a Ret Paladin or a Devastation Evoker. All of those PIs are good. What do you guys think is the non-Unholy DK PI right now? The best PI? Give me make up that number, because it's a pretty big drop off after Unholy. It's like a couple of thousand. It's 5 to 7k, maybe Demo Lock's 8. Okay, let's just say 7k. Okay, so not even a Demo Lock, but slightly under that, 7k. If you add 6 to 7k on Shadow Priest single target right now over the last 2 weeks, 95th percentile on a boss like Taros, again, kill times this boss make it not the best single target gauge, but you are better than every single class in the game except for sub, enhance, unholy, and BM. So I think calling Shadow dumpster sludge single target is kind of not correct. They're good on AoE. I suspected they would be a good Razageth class, but I don't know if enough people have played them yet. How many people have killed it? 2? I mean, it's not enough of a sample size. How is it on Heroic Razageth? It's got to be pretty decent, right? No, well, never mind. Well, what are we looking at? Dathia, they've got to be middle of the pack. Kurog, they've got to be pretty decent. Yeah, very good, including PI. They're like best damage or second on Kurog. Broodkeeper is such a meme. Senarth is a spider. Dude, if you add PI, Shadow Priest is like top 5 on almost all of these fights, by the way. As a class, do you really feel good? Even if you're bringing that much value to the raid, I think it's pretty indicative that someone just came in here and said Shadow Priest single target is dumpster sludge. Because like, even though you are providing that value to a raid by PIing someone who needs it. I actually forgot about something. A Shadow Priest would never PI on Unholy DK, right? Because they're not going to delay it a minute. Only healer priests would do that. Okay, so forget Unholy. They would be PIing the best 2-minute PI, which I think is the best 2-minute PI Devastation Evoker or Ret? It's one of those two, I'm pretty sure. But you could PI Unholy on pull, I know, yeah. You could PI Unholy on pull and then Evoker for every one after that. It actually probably is Devastation Evoker right now, but that's the point. I mean, it's still really, really good, but you don't feel that. It's actually kind of the same feeling as why everyone at the beginning of this patch complained about the Guzzler being a 2-second cast, but people loved it, but the Puzzle Box being a 2-second class, or 2-second cast, and people didn't love it, even though they cited that as the reason they didn't like it, but they liked the Guzzler. It's kind of the same thing. The Guzzler gave you instant gratification and your damage instantly went up when the Puzzle Box was over time. It's kind of the same thing with Priest. You don't immediately see that damage on your meter. Like, for example, if Shadow Priest had the damage they added to other people from PI added to their bar, people's opinion of Shadow Priest would be different than it is right now. True or false? Well, I'm not even going to give you a chance to answer. The answer is definitely true. Okay, so let's talk to Publik. Dude, okay, hold up. Hello, by the way, but I have to address something that someone said in chat. Someone said Shadow self-casts PI 90% of the time. That cannot be true. That is like...
That's... What?
Yeah, that is
what
just...
does that even mean?
That is... Yeah, like, there's no way that 90% of Shadow Priest just Publik casts, because you could literally throw it on a fucking tank and it would have higher value than that.
Okay, I would... If you're talking about, like, general player population, I bet there's quite a lot of people that are taking twins don't even realize it and don't hand it out.
Oh yeah, but you're talking
But-
about people who don't even like play the game, man. Like I
Yeah,
like-
Raiders for sure.
Yeah,
handing
Raiders,
it out.
people-
That's
yeah. Oh, also you got a little popping. You're popping a little bit right now. Do you usually have that issue on your mic?
Discord not great sometimes. One sec, I'll be right
Yeah,
back.
just try to reset it real quick. Dude, Chad, I love talking to Publik. He's a great resource. Shadow Priest should be proud that they have I'm sure not even just him, but a lot of other people as well. Shadow Priest, to my knowledge, have a lot of really good resources and a good community. All right, are you popping?
Hello?
You're not popping. Excellent.
Cool.
Love to hear
I
it.
have like a really nice mic and a great interface, but sometimes I'd like Discord's not a fan of it. So
All good.
Love
Okay. So I don't really know where to begin other than we spoke so many times before this expansion. We had a lot of concerns.
Yeah.
A lot of them were addressed, but also I remember the general feeling being pretty dobby going into the expansion. They've been buffed multiple times. They're now being buffed again. I just kind of want to hear about you are playing the game right now currently, right? You are playing
yeah.
Priest?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So how has your experience playing Priest been so far in Season 1?
I think overall I'd say pretty mid. I think there's a lot to like about the spec. I think there's a lot of parts of it that are just kind of frustrating, or the spec can really feel overwhelming at times. I would say generally it's fairly competitive in rating, definitely in Mythic Plus, which feels good. Could it be better? Absolutely. And I think there are, they have been trying to like get there. I mean, like what we said before about like if Shadow had like another month of dev time and like design time, I think it could be easily the best spec in the game design wise. We're not there by any means. Like we have a bit of ways or things I'd like to see changed, but it's fun. It does damage, could be worse.
Okay, and I know that was because I think the issue isn't really their power level; it's more just the design. Because I know how this feels. Because a lot of people, it's literally that simple. It's like class do damn or class don't do damn, and that's it. But like if you are someone who spends so much time looking at every talent tree release, it's so painful to see them be so close, but then just not seeing the things and not changing it, that it's like you can't even appreciate the stuff that's just fine because you know it could be so much better. So I definitely know how you feel in that way. I will say though, I think, and it's so weird because it's so hard to consider the PI value on someone else that you're going to actually put it on, not like a DK because it's a longer cooldown or a Warlock potentially, to actually have PI be part of your damage. But if you add PI to their value, both in dungeons right now and on most raid fights I was looking at, they're definitely not bad. That class is good.
Oh, it's correct. I mean,
it's super good.
I think like Mythic Plus is the one where it's really hard because it's super group dependent, right? Like,
oh yeah,
I did some
there's
keys
not many
with,
good
like,
2-minute PIs.
If you're playing with the Rogue Windwalker right now, I don't know what you do with PI. Like you're basically just tossing it into the Nether, like because they don't care about haste usually. But in most groups, like you can find some good use out of it, right? Or it works well. I'd say like it's really awkward and frustrating, I think, generally to play with, especially considering you obviously want to use it when you want to, not when they want to, like you're mentioning. I think like the raid still gets lots of value out of it, but yeah, it's just kind of, it's probably here to stay. I'm not a fan of it, but it does make your value in raid from like a utility perspective just massive.
Yeah, and then, well, I guess this raid, I don't think a lot of people have seen this. Like, I just looked at public logs, and there are exactly 2 Shadow Priests that have killed Mythic Razageth on public logs. But, like, you would have also, if Shadow Priest was a good class in all of progression, and, like, people were just, like, running 1 or 2 of them, you would have seen so many people complaining about the only way you could live. See, almost no one has heard these complaints because the only people have been saying it is healers, and like who the fuck cares what healers are saying, right? So like it's like healers are like actually unable to play the game unless a dragon picks them up and puts them down again. But like if those were actually DPS classes, like people would be actually losing their fucking mind that their only way that they have a, like, the worst feeling in raiding is you dying and feeling like you didn't even see what was happening or you had anything to do with it. It's actually the same thing that happened on Anduin. Like Anduin, you wipe and like the group died below and you don't even see it happening, and then your screen goes black and it's over. That's just the worst feeling ever, and that's like how paladins and priests feel on Razageth. It's just like someone picks me up and puts me down again, and that's good, or they miss it and I die, and or if I had to do it on my own, I have no chance. So like I just feel like that's a pretty big issue, even though it's kind of cool that time spiral gives you grip in a lot of cases.
It's not cool. Don't ever say it again. It is
so
cool, bad, man.
It would be more cool if what you said before the expansion was that they gave a choice node with Leap of Faith to make it so you could grip yourself to people. If that got reduced by Time Spiral or made free, that could be pretty
That'd be sick. I mean, that would literally solve the Razageth problem.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to complain too much about Razageth because I think obviously it's quite specific, and I think they'd made that fight to highlight how strong Evokers are. And it's kind of funny, you know, Evokers wouldn't be as cool on that fight if they couldn't leap their friends, their priest and paladin friends, right? So yeah, I don't know. It's unfortunate, but it happens, and I think, you know, we probably won't see something like that kind of a mechanic for a while.
So you went through a lot of processes of getting nerfed and or buffed throughout this patch, basically, and you said like right now they're in a really good spot. We'll talk about the gameplay stuff that still needs to get changed as far as like even after all the changes, but just walk me through what is changing between today and tomorrow. 10.0.5, what can Shadow Priest expect gameplay wise to be slightly different? What are the changes?
Yeah, so a good portion of them happened, I think it was like a week ago with the hotfixes. They just kind of targeted buffed a lot of our single target spells, just in general. It's like Mind Blast, Devouring Plague. It's like almost every single target spell. Mind Spike, Void Bolt. Yeah, and really, it's really interesting that they're doing it this way. It was actually kind of talent balancing without touching the talents, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't buff everything. They only buffed some of our spells. So they've also kind of been almost tweaking our playstyle along the way. I'm not sure how intended some of this is. So we are kind of playing with a good chunk of like what has been changing. The big stuff that's changing on Tuesday or Wednesday, for depending on your realm or whatever, is they're adding new spells to Psychic Link. So specifically, Mind Games, Void Bolt, and Void Torrent are now being added to Psychic Link. This is fucking massive. I think Shadow is easily the best range DPS in keys after this. Potentially.
Wow. Whoa. That is fat. Wait, what are they adding?
I feel pretty, at least from a damage perspective, obviously, you know, utility is still kind of out the window, but this is just really big. So yeah, Psychic Link is effectively Shadow Priest's version of Blade Flurry, except, you know, it's activated with our dots. So you can walk up to a pack, Shadow Crash something with Misery Talented. 8 of those guys get Vampiric Touch, and then you just kind of dump Void Torrent, Mind Games, and then most of your single target spells
and
all
just
replicate.
Hits everything.
Yeah, and it's actually ridiculous. It's just so much damage, and you can do that, you know, pretty often. So it's gonna be amazing cleave, and it's basically just 2 points in the down tree.
And that's that's huge. I feel like,
and also will make us like super bursty as well with Void Torrent. So Void Torrent's baseline 1 minute cooldown, and depending on the build, you can actually talent that down into a 30-second cooldown, which syncs up really well with Shadow Crash. So yeah, I mean, from a key perspective, it's gonna feel great. It's gonna be amazing.
When has Shadow Priest been one of the best 3 classes in Mythic Plus?
There was some like really random stuff. Like I think BFA had like, I don't know, like a small period of time, but really almost never, I think.
Dude, that's gonna catch the entire community off guard, and it's gonna be like, if that ends up actually happening, that is going to be like every Shadow Priest main right now is gonna be just owning everyone, because there's 0 Fodom Shadow Priest. Like at the very minimum, it's gonna take like a month from now or more for those to be actually geared up and competitive. So if that's true, you guys are gonna be like gold. Everyone's gonna want you.
Yeah, I mean, it's still kind of awkward because like having range DPS to keys is still, there is somewhat of a range tax of, you know, Shadow just doesn't have as much CC or utility as like a Rogue, for example, and like, or just in general, melee have better kicks, they have better CCs. But I think like that one range DPS slot in the key, like Shadow feels like the top spot for me. Obviously I'm a little biased, but you know, trying to be objective, I'm already doing a lot of damage with the recent changes. Adding Void Torrent, Void Bolt, and Mind Games is just gonna crank it. So yeah, it's pretty sick.
Dude, fucking that's wild. What about the insanity?
Yeah, so that does have some build implications for folks this week. We don't usually take Void Torrent in keys. We haven't really been pathing that way, and now we will for every single key because it's really strong. So that will change up kind of how you're playing a little bit, and kind of what you're aiming for.
How do you feel with your build diversity currently? Not only in 10.0.5, but I think the question I've asked other people is, let's say you kill all 8 bosses in Vault of the Incarnates. How many different talent builds do you play through those 8 bosses?
I think right now there's only going to be like 3, maybe 4. Kind of depends on if you're like padding on ads or not, is kind of where that comes down to. Unfortunately, the tree still has those problems where there are just so many nodes that you will take all the time, and we have about 3 or 4 nodes that just don't make sense in PvE. And so that kind of leads to a pretty large reduction in kind of what is viable, if that makes sense. And kind of just along the lines of a lot of it isn't really changing your gameplay, so it kind of works out to, you know, what's just doing the best number-wise. So it does kind of, our builds are somewhat restricted on that. Kind of at every layer of the tree, there isn't a whole lot of expression in that regard. So yeah, I mean, that's where a lot of like my disappointment comes with the tree. Like Mind Spike, you literally should take that all the time. Mind Flay Insanity does so much damage, you should probably take it all the time. Void Torrent, same thing. And you kind of have those spread out throughout the tree where it does kind of limit what you can do with like build choices and things like that. So
Okay. At the beginning of this expansion, we talked about capstones and how some of them just seemed like they really just wanted to have these idols here, but a lot of them just still kind of didn't make
Yeah.
sense, and a lot of them weren't really that good. Has that changed? And if not, what about these do you feel like is still really problematic design-wise?
they're not capstone nodes in design, in the like a design sense. You know, I think a lot of them just kind of tack on to your build. They don't really change what you're doing a lot of the times. Usually the things that change what you do happen right above them on the kind of ninth row. So like the capstone nodes are actually just there as like point efficient dumps for your talent points, where it's like, oh, I definitely want Mind Devourer in keys, like 100% of the time. So Yogg Saron, the idol of Yogg Saron is 1 point away. So it's just really point efficient to take the idols a lot of the time, and not like we actually want them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's the rough part. And, you know, as we've done all this work in Sims and stuff, trying to like solve the talent tree, really what it comes down to is you get the stuff that you have to because it just does so much damage. And then where is it point efficient to finish the build? And right now it's kind of where the space the idols come in. They definitely could be more playstyle defining. That's where I'd like them to be. But right now they're just not, you know, really that. It's usually the nodes before them in that kind of section. So I think it's hard because Blizzard's never really come out and said like, this is what a capstone node should do, and this is how it should change your DPS, or this is kind of, you know, our goal for like how the tree paths out. We've kind of just had to infer that, and it would be nice to kind of know what their goals are, because honestly, it's a little hard to tell. I think, especially looking at all the specs together, like there's kind of all over the place in terms of how they treat these kind of end nodes, I think.
Okay, and then moving kind of back towards the class tree, I know that there was a ton of issues with the class tree leading into this expansion. They made a bunch of changes to make it less ass, but I'm just a couple questions. How do you feel about the class tree as a Shadow Priest? Is it still kind of restrictive? Do you get everything you want? I know Healer Priest had way bigger of an issue with it. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Shadow, you can easily get everything you want. There is some expression of kind of, you pick the utility you need for the key or that raid encounter, and you know, there is some individuality here. It's not a whole lot. It definitely could be better. You can tell they really struggled to put Shadow, Disc, and Holy on the same class tree, and I think hybrid specs in general, just because Shadow wants out of a class tree is so different than what Disc and Holy want, and I think that just as an experiment is just really hard to kind of say if it's worked or not. But yeah, I mean, I think it's fine. Like, it's adequate. Like, could it be better? Sure. And they have been making tweaks, I think, more for healers than anything. But, you know, like I said, we're getting what we want. There are some really, really powerful nodes in this tree. You know, so that's always good. But yeah, definitely, you know, could be better. And it's really hard because I think for me, there are kind of a lot of nodes that I'll just never pick as a PvE Shadow Priest. But I think that's to be expected to some degree. So it's kind of, you know, how to improve it is kind of hard, because the nodes that I don't care about, healers might like, or PvP Shadow Priest might like, and so that kind of what makes it a little harder, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like other classes that are hybrids that have done it like way better or worse, and I just think they're uncomparable. Like I think Shaman does it a little better, but also Shaman just has a million more buttons that that are relevant and able to choose from. So like when you're looking at that tree, you're like, oh, this is really cool. I can pick between these things, but like other classes just don't have that many things. And also that's kind of a downside too if you've ever tried to keybind a Shaman. I don't know anyone on goddamn planet Earth that has, you know, Totemic Recall, Tranquil Air, Stone Skin, Poison Cleansing Totem. If you guys have all of these buttons bound, you are a fucking warlord. Like you're a god amongst men.
Or a macro genius.
Yeah, or a macro genius. You're crazy. If you had any time to maybe talk about the top 2 to 3 things, we get it. Shadow Priest is going to be banger in the patch. They're going to do crazy damage, but they still have design flaws. If you had 3 specific things you could point out that you feel like are worth the time of a Blizzard developer looking at and understanding what is wrong with them and maybe what I wouldn't even go with a potential fix unless it's obvious, right? Because I think as the community, we're usually much better at pointing out problems than giving solutions. What are the three biggest problems design-wise you see with Shadow right now?
Yeah, so the first one is we have our filler logic is too complicated. So Mind Spike should not coexist with Mind Flay. It just doesn't make sense. It kind of bloats the rotation, and it makes it really hard for a new person to come into the spec and kind of inherently know what to do. What I mean by that is when you talent into Mind Spike, it is a non-cooldown casted filler. It doesn't replace Mind Flay. So kind of understanding when to press which is really convoluted. I literally have a weak aura made to tell me which filler to press based on all of my talent combinations and buffs that I have active. And no one should ever need that.
Yeah, especially the person who's the main contributor to the class community. That would be pretty insane,
I'm just fully admitting, like, when you change your builds kind of frequently between keys or between raid fights, it can be kind of hard to, like, be like, yeah, this is where a Surge of Darkness proc goes against a Mind Flay Insanity proc versus a hard-casted Spike versus a hard-casted Mind Flay. It's a lot, and it's something that the average player shouldn't have to care about, but currently they do. I could pitch a lot of solutions here. I think the first one would just be, I don't think you should be able to have both active at the same time. And I think it'd be as simple as that. They're already kind of working towards that with some of the changes they've made. So I feel like they kind of agree, but yeah, we'll kind of have to see where that shakes out.
Okay, number two.
Number two, our cooldowns need more identity. So right now in that kind of center section, you choose between Dark Ascension or Void Eruption.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of unheard of in the game that a class gets to choose their major cooldown.
True.
And that creates a lot of, I think, it's just weird. And neither cooldown really is changing a whole lot of what you're doing, which makes it really interesting and kind of awkward at the same time. Right now, we kind of pick between the two based on what damage pattern you want. Like, do you want to be a 1-minute spec or a 2-minute spec? And there are some like niches that each one kind of has, but in terms of play style, it's not really defined very well. So I think they need to either scrap it and go back to having one cooldown, give each one kind of its own identity. There are a lot of different ways they could do that. Like we've seen Void Form iterations, the last 3 expansions, they could kind of add more things to that. Dark Ascension could play off more what those builds had in the past. They could do a lot of different things with it, but yeah, it's kind of lacking overall.
Okay, number 3, last one.
Yeah, the third one I would say, there's a lot of things I could say here. I think the one that I'm probably the most passionate about is for them to kind of revive shadowy apparitions into being a more fun part of our kit. We have a few talents in here that interact with shadowy apparitions, but I don't think any of them really truly make it as fun as it could be. And I think they could actually use that to solve a lot of our current problems. Like one of the main things we have right now is like maintaining dots on multiple targets is kind of a tricky mess, or like a Rube Goldberg machine of how you get it working. They could solve that with shadowy apparitions, extending your dots when they hit the target instead of mental decay.
Okay.
And just to kind of in general, like I think every Shadow Priest will tell you it's really fun to play the spec when you see a bunch of shadowy spirits pop out of you. And that's the kind of build that a lot of people love. I know there's a bunch of clips that from like Legion especially, or BFA, when you just had a ton of spirits being generated. I think it's BFA. Yeah, I know there's this specific clip of like Toldagor. They pull that entire first pack of like room of mobs, and there's just thousands of apparitions flying. It's a really fun version of the spec, and I wish they would kind of double down and invest more on that. So, yeah.
I'm trying to find one of the cool. We have I think in our kill POV,
there's a lot of ways they could do that. I mean, but it's I think really fun whenever that's kind of part of the playstyle.
I don't know if they show Lip. Oh, I think they do. It's like as a priest. I don't know if this is the part of the fight where it pops off the most, but he like goes down to the downstairs phase alone, and I just remember
gets all that haste.
Yeah, and he gets all the haste, and then he like dots everything. You can kind of see it now, but like once an actual set of ads spawn, I think they move off when they do. But like when the ad set spawns and he has the haste, it's actually crazy how many on that fight. That was really good.
Yeah, and they made 2 changes this expansion that were really sad. So one, if you're in a raid group, you can't see your fellow Shadow Priest apparitions. So if I'm in a raid group with you and you're on like whatever, you can't see my apparitions anymore. So that's kind of sad. And then they also changed it to where critical strikes used to spawn 2 apparitions, and now they just spawn 1 apparition that deals double damage. So they've kind of made a couple changes that makes it just less fun, I think, and less visually interesting for a spec that doesn't have a whole lot of animations to begin with. So yeah, wish they would kind of address that. I think it'd be fun for a lot of people.
All right, cool. Do you have any final notes about Priest in the patch?
Yeah, the last thing I want to point out is Blizzard is fixing 2 really important bugs on Tuesday that the specs had for almost over 4 months, actually. So I'm really happy we're seeing 2 of those bugs being fixed. We have about 18 more that I would love to get looked at. And the more bugs they
Do you have a
fix,
list
the
of
more
those?
complete. Yeah, of course I have a list.
I'll just flash it on my screen real quick, just in case. Here we go. GitHub. Oh, what is this?
Yeah, so this is actually really, I'm just kind of nerding out for a second, but this is basically a giant list of all bugs for a bunch of specs. There's more than just Priest in this repo, but I like thoroughly document how to trigger the bug, what happens when it goes off or whatever, and very detailed. So yeah, so this is how many we have. 20 right now. Like I said, there are 2 that are going to be fixed on Tuesday. One of them is actually just straight up buffing Mindseer by like 10%. That one's great. And the other one is Ancient Madness will start working for Void Form the way it should. So
This is fucking huge nerd energy. I love it.
yeah,
God damn. All right, cool. Hell yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you. I will talk to you in a few weeks, and I'll check up if Shadow Priest is still indeed turbo OP.
Yeah, we'll see. Or you can laugh at me if I was wrong.
Yeah.
Or maybe get some.
I will not laugh. The community will be kick Wing. I am not the I am not the person who's leading that. They have a mind of their own. DK class changes. Yeah, what DK needs in 10.1 is they need the same love that Arms Warrior just got. Arms Warrior used to have an issue where they could only AoE or single target, and in 1.5 patch, they basically completely removed that. Unholy DK needs that bad. Unholy just has a big issue right now where their AoE in the right situations is the best in the game, and their single target in the right situation is the best in the game. So how do you merge them without like fucking over the other one? I'm just gonna call Atlas real quick if you're in here.
Yo,
What would you fix about Unholy? How do you solve the problem?
epidemic baseline bursting stores in its place.
And it's done?
Yeah.
You think so? Because it's literally just one talent. That still doesn't allow you to full AoE with Gargoyle, does it?
Not full AoE, but it would.
But I guess that would be
better
too
than
OP.
just 2 target depth coil.
Because like the way that Arms did it is like Arms they basically just had this like super restrictive capstone thing, whatever it was, your Valor and Victory, and they made that a 1-pointer, and they swapped Bloodletting and Battle Lord, and like now it's just within this one talent in the middle, and they let you touch these. Like I wonder if it's the same as Unholy, where like I don't even know if this would make sense, but like the whole army thing like connect with the Gargoyle. I don't know. Well, I mean, or you can just Giga Chad one more dance. Okay, let's just see how that works then. And like a full Unholy build, like a Mythic Plus build. Because I feel like you want, as an Unholy DK, you kind of need to play Gargoyle and Mythic Plus for it to ever be like super meta. Because like obviously like Algathar, you can like stack up a bunch of ads and kill stuff. But, like kind of everyone can kill stuff. Unholy's super insane at it, but you're not really cleaving a lot of it on bosses. So I feel like it just loses so much value.
I've been playing a lot of keys because I've been playing the game a lot, and I despise DPSing as a DK in keys because it's a lose-lose every single key you enter. Like none of it ever feels good, and the best like compromise you have is you play like this weird disease build where you don't really do.
Yeah,
anything.
I hate that build. I hate at least, dude.
It's bad.
I played that build at the beginning of the expansion, and it was with 5-second Plaguebringer too. That shit was fucking brutal.
Yeah, except it's like the thing that makes you feel the best about your spec, but it's so boring that you hate it anyway. And it doesn't do deep. So I don't know. I don't. If I do keys, I hate DPSing them on DK. Like I hate it.
Yeah, it's pretty tragic.
fun.
Like the only thing that DK is like super insane at right now is like Unholy and Raid on bosses, and then Frost on. Actually, okay, I feel like in Raid they both feel pretty good. Like I feel like Frost
is the most fun it has ever been in the game for me. I have never played a version of Frost that's better than this.
Yeah,
I
which
think
is
it's
super
great.
goated.
The only problem is it's like both specs of DK. Like I was listening to you talk to other classes about how often they change their talents and how many builds they have boss to boss. Frost has one build. You never change it. You never change any of the talents. You never even think about changing it, and it sucks.
Dude, the crazy thing is you said that before the expansion because like you looked at like the exact build. Dude, I haven't looked at it in a while. I bet I could fucking rip this bitch from memory.
You never change that literally ever, and then you have like.
Wait, do you not even play Chill Streak?
No, you have 3 talents that are very, very fun, and they're all 1 point away, and you're just staring at it in the face, and you never get them. You can't get Dragon, you can't get Chill Streak, and you can't get Double Chains.
Dude,
Yeah,
the fact that
it feels bad.
you don't play Chill Streak on 2 targets is a fucking disaster. Like that makes
Yeah,
no
that
sense.
button's fun as hell. Like it's not even like intricate the way you play it, but it's just kind of fun looking that little thing bounce around. But you can't do that.
Dude, chill streak is one of the most fun buttons in the whole game. It's insane.
Yeah.
And it even has a good choice node where it can like randomly pop off, even though the other ones are relevant.
Yeah.
So like
It's fun and you just hit it. That's good.
God,
don't
everyone in
think about
chat
it, you
wish
said it.
two-hand ablit was good. Good.
I think that's fine. If there was an ablit build that got played for like 1 tier, I think that'd be good. It'd be healthy for the spec.
Good.
It's boring, but that's fine.
Okay, so yeah, this needs God. Wait, do you actually only play one build? Like literally one. You never change this.
I have never changed my talents. I will never ever even think about changing my talents.
The entire expansion as Frost. You've never changed your talents.
Unless they change fundamentally how anything works, I will never change off that build ever.
Even though
Unless they do like
yeah,
sweeping
it's kind of
tuning
like
changes,
Kiss
so there's
Curse
no
though,
blip.
right? Because you're also saying this is the most fun version of Frost you've ever played. So it's like the only way it's better is if like they make a couple of these options that are currently good worse, so you actually realistically have to pick between a couple other things. But that would probably be more fun.
I don't know. It's very intricate. It's like the most skill expression Frost DK has ever been.
Yeah, I know it's insane.
it's-
But like you could
it's
do without
nice.
something like Frost Reaper. That doesn't make you play the game better. Okay, just make Frost Reaper fucking baseline. GG. All right, that one's gone. And then now you have another point to go around, and you can throw that point into Frostworm's Fury. You can throw it into base Chill Streak.
Frost Reaper's shit because it was baseline last expansion, and then they put in the talent tree.
Yuck.
I don't know. The Frost tree just feels very restrictive.
Is
Like,
the class tree any good now?
The class tree might be more restrictive than the Frost tree, which is crazy.
Oh, I actually saw that because someone was saying, like, I was asking a DK if they could take something, and they were emphatically like, dude, there's no way. I'm just like,
I remember Tags whispered me during progression, and he's like, "How do DKs break roots?" And I was like, "Wraith Walk," and he's like, "Okay, cool." And I was like, "You can't ever take that ever."
yeah. Imagine to
that's two
get
of the
Wraith.
specs.
Yeah, to get Wraith Walk, you're getting Death Pact or Asphyxiate, which neither
You
of
drop,
which you want.
you drop to get Wraith Walk. You have to drop AMZ, and as Frost, that's non-existent. You can't ever do that. You can do that as Unholy, and it just feels bad as blood.
Oh, it's gonna definitely feel bad.
And then like the bottom of the tree, it's like if you want literally any of the utility that's on the entire top side of your tree, you have to give up throughput.
I do like the Death's Echoes in the game though. I feel like that's insane. That's been like super fun to play.
Yeah, I like it too. I like being able to grip things twice whenever I have the choice to. Like double Death's Advance is cool too because you can just ignore every mechanic in the game. But I think that one's a little overblown. I've played the class for like a long time without being able to do that, so you kind of work around it. But it is nice that you kind of get it for free.
How do you feel about Insidious Chill?
What is that?
Holy fuck. Dude, the funny thing is like this is obviously just Curse of Weakness and the Rogue Poison thing, but like I don't even know if anyone knows if they stack. Because like you would just never
I don't know.
Yeah,
I've never talented that unless I was like Blood and like I was doing like a weird build that like the only reason why I took it is so that I can get to Empower quicker. But yeah, I don't Insidious Chills, I don't know. They, not to point fingers here.
Okay.
But when the expansion was in development and then you're bringing up how DK doesn't have raid utility that's like
Correct.
unique and makes them valuable.
Correct.
That was their fix to it, and it's useless.
Yeah, but like it was
really
said
bad.
that it was pretty useless from the beginning, unless at the time it seemed not useless because Curse of Weakness wasn't in the game yet. It was never in their talent tree and it was not on beta, and then just randomly one beta build, they just brought it back without saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the rogues didn't really have it because they had to take a trophic poison. So like it was kind of the only attack speed reducer, but then also you just couldn't take it. So you can't
You
take
want to
it.
know what my fix is?
What's up?
It's a crazy fix. It's actually a revolutionary idea, and it makes sense if you think
Okay,
about it. Even
okay.
thematically, if you want to go that way, thematically it's good. Okay, look at the Windwalker or the Monk tree.
Sure.
Those fuckers are criminals.
They are
first off.
criminals, yeah. They have
they
generous, poor, and close to heart.
Yeah. They have two. They have three actually, because they bring Mystic Touch too. They bring Mystic Touch, Healing Taken, and Avoidance.
And all of them are irreplaceably good in raids. Like they're
Yeah,
like imagine not having 8% increased healing taken on your whole raid on a boss like Kurog.
Yeah. Here's my idea. Hear me out on this one. Revolutionary.
Yep.
The healing increase. Chop that out of their tree.
Okay.
Slap it in the DK tree and just call it Vampora.
You're kind of spitting. You could
Yeah.
literally just replace. But is it capstone though? How would you feel if it was exactly where Insidious Chill was, and you had to choose between damage or an 8% healing taken buff for your whole raid?
Okay, well, if that's the argument, their stuff isn't a capstone either, so it's kind of cool.
It's
if
literally
not a
in the
capstone.
exact same spot in the tree as it is on DK.
Yeah.
But-
Except
but-
mine's useless, and I literally never take it, and they always take it.
Yeah. Well, that's because every single Windwalker capstone sucks. Like, all of them are terrible, and all of Frost DKs are super insane. So
Yeah, but like the rest of their tree is fucking crazy, so like it's all good.
I also feel like a big reason of why this Insidious Chill is ass is because Blood Draw exists. Like, if I just just pick a bunch of shit just to path down the tree and prove something at the bottom, like you could every spec gets Empowered Rune Weapon, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you just go Insidious Chill, Icy Talons, and Empowered Rune Weapon, then you're hard chilling, right? Because if you needed to get to Rune Mastery, you can just slam Will the Necropolis instead, then grab
The
Rune.
problem is when you want Empowered Weapon and Soul Reaper, because then, or let's say you're intermixing between the ones in the middle and the ones on the left and right, then you're forced down either the hard right or the hard left. If that makes sense. If you want both the middle and either left or right.
Yeah, and Wraithwalk is Kring.
Yeah.
So
It also doesn't help that the stuff right above the capstones, those are all of your like very impactful throughput, and they're all 2-point nodes. So you need all 3 of those, which is 6 points.
Ugh.
Yeah, it's weird. It's very restrictive. And the reason why I don't like it is because I feel like I can't ever take any of my utility at the top of the tree without griefing my own damage. And that's not a good feeling.
No, it's definitely not good. Wait, do you get 11 points in the bottom here? Yeah, and then if you just take Insidious Chill away, as long as if you took... ugh.
Yeah, not getting Will of the Necropolis also stinks bad. Because that thing's crazy.
Yeah, well, Necropolis is
Really
insane.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you can't take it. Because
Well, it is insane. I think it's decidedly less insane on DK because, like, you're never, ever going to die. So, like...
You're doing, like, on Razageth, I think it's like 13k HPS. Like, you're doing DH levels of healing. You're beating the Warlocks.
Yeah,
It's pretty good.
fucking insane. Okay.
It does feel better for Frost than Unholy, though, because the way Frost plays right now, you're just ripping perma 2-minute plus breaths, so you actually can't ever press Death Strike. But also, you're kind of just chilling on HP anyways, so it's...
No, you're never going to die. Also, AMS's expansion is super broken.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like a 200k absorb
Every
on a
40
second
seconds.
cooldown.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's...
That also immunes applications of mechanics. It's so fucking stupid.
Yeah.
I feel
No,
like
it's good.
the thing is, like, even though DK could have some design increases, I feel like DK will probably be played at a high level in raids for like the rest of the expansion, just because it just has so much range. Like if you just look at Frost, Cleave, and Unholy Single Target and ignore literally everything else, they will have a spot on every raid boss for the rest of the X-Pack, most likely.
Yeah, that's why I'm okay with like the fact that Frost doesn't really ever change its talents, is because the current build that it plays just does everything at the same time. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
okay.
super fucking good.
And it's rewarding. It's nice. It's weird. It's like the first time ever where I'm playing the class and I feel like I'm going back and watching my VODs and I'm like planning out how I'm gonna do the rest of the fight based off of what I'm watching, because it's like the way I would describe it is it's the DPS plays the way that Disc Priest has to set up their healing. Like, you have to actively be thinking about what buttons you're going to press in the future and then adjust accordingly, and every single boss is different.
Yeah, that's insane if it's good, but it's also super oppressive and, like, people won't have fun. Like, you wonder why people don't like Breath. There's a few reasons for that. Obviously, it's like it drops against your will a bunch of times. But, like,
yeah,
just like if you are not having 100% uptime in Breath right now in raids, you probably hate that spell. But if you are, you probably love that spell because of the work and intricacy you had to attain that. So, like, it's just that. I mean, it just describes the polarization of that spell in general.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people have this take where, like, they say Breath is boring. You just hit one button, you're only obliting, and that's like it, and there's no thinking to it.
That's just completely incorrect. You have to think insane, or else it just drops.
The entire fight, one of them lasted 6 minutes, the other one lasted 3.5, and that felt good.
Yep.
There's more to it.
Being able to outplay people around you is very fun. All right, I'm gonna go play the game a little bit because I'm fucking fried. I'm gonna talk to the rest of the people tomorrow.
Okay.
All right, thanks for chatting to me, bud. See ya.
How you doing?
Hello. I kind of just want to talk to you on about a few things, kind of ending in the priest changes for 10.0.5, But before that, I kind of want to hear about your experience of playing a priest so far just in this expansion, how you felt like it was going to go coming out of beta, how it's been. I think it's definitely super interesting how a couple of the specs are performing compared to others. So how has your experience been playing priest this expansion so far?
It's been really weird going from beta in particular, because you look at most of the time when you're doing raid testing, you'll get, halfway through a boss fight or something like that. Well, you won't, but I will. And then I'll be like, oh, I hit my ramp timings. I hit this great ramp timing and I'm doing all this healing and everybody's still trying to learn. And it feels wonderful. But people are also still trying to figure out Evoker. And now that they have Evoker and even Druid just kind of like soak up all the output really easily.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of like Disc felt good kind of early. Like getting the first couple boss kills felt good. And then everyone figured out Evoker, figured out, Druid was just doing Miles healing more as well, and then just started stacking those and it just became who brings the most output. Even a lot of fights that you thought would feel pretty good for Barrier, where like, yeah, Kurog feels pretty good, but then like even Razageth feels like you're a lot more limited, where, half the group on positive negatives gets the effect of Barrier. Or you're splitting the raid in half for long periods of time, so your output is just like terrible as well. So overall, the really low output Disc brings to the table, the weird areas that you don't really get as much utility value out of things like Barrier. It's been
it
is
a
start for an expansion.
Yeah, exactly. If you're a Disc Priest player specifically, I think Holy still has like decent value as well. It's just that Holy has always historically been compared to like Resto Druids, to Mistweavers. Actually, the Mistweavers are more melee, so I guess just been like Resto Druids and certainly Evokers as far as just like basically pure throughput healers.
Yeah.
And in the past, they have been like pretty competitive, but I feel like Resto Druids and Preservation just make Holy feel bad because they kind of do the same thing. They're just way better at it. And Disc, yeah, this is on 3 different levels. It feels bad to be a Disc Priest in raids right now, and kind of always has in dungeons, and we'll get to dungeons in a second. But in raids, it's like, what have you always been good at? Especially with Kyrian Boon, you were like the healer that like no matter how much damage was happening during this part of the fight, you were going to live that. I think the most like insane I ever saw it was in some random farm clear. We had the entire raid in Sylvanas P2 get hit by a veil on accident. Like we just took a gate and it like randomly spawned. And our priest just popped Boon and just healed the entire raid off of 6 stacks, like pretty early into farm. And it's like literally no other healer could even think about doing that. Like it would be nowhere close. And it was just so unique. And now, so like their uniqueness for a while has been that. And now Evokers and Resto Druids, in a sense, can cover a part of the fight with Resto Druids with really often cooldowns, and Evokers, as now that people are figuring it out, is they have a fat ramp as well, right? And that's like kind of removed the need, just the addition of a healer spec that covers a niche that Disc had in general. Forgetting Resto Druid, they just lose less value because other classes can kind of do the same thing, as well as having other benefits. The second thing is you had Barrier, I feel like so many people don't understand this in chat, but like going from raid tier to raid tier, you could have the exact same tuning from one raid to the next, but based on the way that the fights are laid out and the way that you take damage, the meta or the tier list of classes could be totally different. For example, if all of the hard damage you took on Razageth was able to be done in a Barrier and it was like impossibly hard to do, Disc gains fucking infinite value compared to their 2 competitors in Resto Druid and Preservation. This raid, Barrier was just dog shit. Absolute complete dog shit. It was so bad. It was basically only good on Kurog.
I mean, you talked about like Sylv, where it's like, hey, everybody, let's get the entire raid stacked in this one mechanic and have Barrier.
Yeah,
to,
Banshee's Fury. The only thing that killed you in that fight was Banshee's Fury, and you were just in a Barrier for almost all of them. Super OP. 25% DR in today's day and age, nothing competes with it. It's way better than Spirit Link. It's way better than AMZ, than Darkness. It's just the most valuable thing by far. And this raid just didn't have anything for that. And then on top of all of that, they've famously had bad movement. And on the last boss of this raid, which is probably something they won't repeat again, the only way you could stay on the platform is if a dragon picked you up and put you down again somewhere else. And that just felt like in every sense of the word, you were getting carried throughout the raid by being a priest. And
you were just brought because of Fortitude.
Yeah,
you're able to sort of like trade off ramps during like positive and negative, and like you could take over at that area, but the Evokers were carrying so hard on like all those frost absorbs And so that's not really something that Disc can do a great job of with just 10 people at their disposal. I mean, Light's Wrath gives you some burst, but the Emerald Communion, Lifebind combination, things like that are just ridiculous right now. And the spec just does not have the output by a mile compared to Evoker and Druid.
Definitely. And
It's been
another
like a
thing,
total erosion.
another thing is that Disc in the past, and Paladin specifically with the meta in the last 2 expansions, were the only 2 healers that were doing damage. And they just almost default on top of everything else. They had such a good rage spot because they were just bringing so much more raid damage than other classes, including PI and their passive damage. And now, Resto Druids literally just gaining Nature's Vigil makes them a very viable... They gave them 1 spell and it totally fixed their entire issue of not being able to do damage and healing at the same time. And Evokers have some of the best burst AoE of healers in the game, or the best burst AoE. And that's viable on many different raid fights, as well as like their tier set allowing them to get a little bit of single target while they're healing. So like you've even lost another edge that you've had in the past. So now their mobility and their extremely specific healing style really sticks out when there's just so many other classes that can fill those voids, but also just have more throughput. So yeah, I think everyone there, that's like very obvious. I still think Disc is a good spec. It's just that like other specs kind of really, really good. So anyways, changes are happening.
All the benefits that Disc had just kind of got eroded by other specs, or they were kind of like handed off to others. It would be fine if we were doing somewhat competitive throughput, but like the number overall for competitive output, they just really missed the ball on tuning. They like nerfed some abilities like Mind Games specifically for Disc because they thought Disc was doing too much healing. And they specifically were nerfing like Divine Aegis because I believe it's bugged on Razageth and producing more shielding than intended, but they just took that as the whole spell is OP. And it was really like a mediocre performer throughout most of Prague. And they just kind of eroded everything across the board for Raid.
Okay, so Disc is getting changes in 10.0.5. They have, like, I think the second longest list of things besides maybe Arms Warrior and maybe Mistweaver Monk. No, actually looks like maybe the longest. Tell me about a lot of the potency here. I saw, this is not in this post, I don't think, but there was a separate post where they increased the healing that usually comes from your character when you feel behind in like a Mythic Plus dungeon, and just more like snap healing in a 5-man setting. So we can talk about those changes as well as the overall 10.0.5 changes. What are they doing to kind of fix a lot of these issues?
Okay, so that's what you have in front of you is a lot of like gameplay changes, but just to touch very briefly on the numerical changes, they doubled the healing of Powered Radiance, which is your Atonement Applicator. They made Sins of the Many, that's the thing you're talking about where you fall behind. Sins of the Many is a baseline buff that we have in Dragonflight where you gain just 30% more damage, and after you have 5 atonements applied to allies, it begins to sort of diminish in steps here. So they've made that go from 30% base damage to 40%, which means you're getting a 10% flat damage buff whenever you're in dungeons all the time.
Okay, that's good. That helps kind of bridge the gap between them and specifically Evoker's damage, but obviously probably not still as much.
Yeah, and so the big changes that you're seeing on your screen are some of the overall sort of like gameplay changes. Mind Blast costs so much mana that they reduced its baseline, and I believe they kind of missed it in the patch notes, but it's on PTR. There's another talent which gives it a second charge and makes it cost even less.
Okay.
So in total, it cost about a third of what it used to.
Very, very good. Did they give you any? Did they consolidate or give you any extra points in your spec tree as well?
Not any new points, but they just sort of replaced some like garbage and they just sort of updated some things.
Okay. So you feel like the tree overall is just a lot better.
Yeah, so what they really had was the dead branch on like the right side with like the squid, the Mindbender updates. They did a lot to make that better, one of which making Mind Blast just castable by reducing its mana cost by like 60-something%. They made Shadow Covenant a lot stronger by doubling the duration out of Embrace Shadow and then making it automatically turn Penance into a shadow spell. And then they changed around a lot of these. It's in the middle. You'll see things like Abyssal Reverie, I think is what it's called, where it is now, Stolen Psyche replaces Abyssal Reverie or vice versa. Instead of having only Mind Blast healing increased, all of your Shadow Spell Atonement is increased across the board.
Okay, making Shadow Covenant a lot more viable.
Yes, really, really strong. It's one of your most efficient abilities that you have access to now, especially if you have a longer duration, because it's beefing up your Mind Blast, which is cheap and easy to spend. Your Mind Games is going to be decent with it. Just overall, extremely good. Your Mind Blast is going to extend the duration of your Mindbender, and it's going to reduce its cooldown. So instead of having 12 seconds on for Mindbender and then like 40-something seconds of a cooldown, you can so heavily reduce the cooldown of Mindbender that you have maybe 10, 15 seconds of downtime.
Oh, downtime? Okay.
Again.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So you can maintain it. It's going to regen mana for you. It's going to cleave and do AoE damage and just continue to give you consistent output throughout your dungeons.
Okay, so all of these changes included, how do you feel like Disc will play as a... would you agree that most of these changes seem to be aimed at making them more viable in a dungeon environment?
Oh, 100%. A lot of these changes are really 5-man focused, and they still need to do a lot to make the spec better for raids. Like playing even farm content, but even prog content, I don't think there's a lot of areas where you feel pressured to play Disc Priest. Maybe Kurog, like you were saying. But overall, I think for a lot of guilds progressing these days, output is king. And also not playing a spec that has 50 million buttons and something that's going to be a little more simple is going to just keep your priest healer alive.
I would. I mean, I did this recently. I started progressing Kurog with like a guild that I'm playing with in farm just for one of my guys. And our comp is like Resto Druid, Evoker, Resto Shaman, Paladin, and then Holy Priest. And I feel like there's no reason to play Disc with that comp. Like, I feel like you could play Disc and it'd be fine, but like the reality of most people in this game having Disc be a better performer than Holy on that fight is really unlikely, especially with the ability to reduce personals with how insane personals are in that fight. To where I just feel like it just has so many fundamental flaws. Like, why would you make the fight that much harder trying to find an exact ramp window? And then even then, these classes that are doing passive throughput are just kind of beating you. So like I feel like the Hymn and the Salve just have way more value.
Yeah, and it's also just simpler. Like, there's a lot of different little things that can kill you on a fight like Kurog, so why gum up progress with potentially dying and wasting a little bit of time when Holy's a lot more simple, straightforward. It's almost always doing great output unless you're in, like, the top 3% of people playing Disc or something like that right now. The spec is just so complicated and not really worth the reward at the moment.
I think that's actually the big thing, because like when I watched Nick in the past, like our Disc Priest Nick is fucking insane. He's certainly our best healer, like him and Dryny. Like Nick is a fucking freak beast. His intuition on a raid fight to be able to see ahead of time and like very quickly in progression have that level of like value as a Disc Priest is so rare to find. I think intuition is the best way to describe it. It's the Disc Priest trait that just makes you really good at that class. It requires so much intuition, and that is, I just feel like I was watching him a little bit this raid doing it, and I'm just like, man, this is so valuable, but for what? Like, you just don't feel it's such a high skill cap class that like you do, but like the reward for being super good at it just isn't there, because it's like the payphone meme with the with melee on Halandris and ranged on Halandris with the dude singing and then the melee sweating. That's like Disc. Like, you're just sweating trying to figure it all out, and there's just an evoker listening and singing to payphone, just like fucking just mass healing the whole fucking raid, and it's like totally easy. And it's like, why would you? Those two things really matter a lot.
Yeah, and you need to survive. You need to be able to execute the same thing over and over again. And I was watching Nick. I was able to see the bags under his eyes, 10, 12 days into the raid. It's just exhausting, the stuff that you have to go through to be able to clear the raid as Disc these days. It's not like, oh, you executed a little poorly, but you had Spirit Shell like in Nathria, so it's all good. You're still absorbing and still mitigating damage better than any other healer could. It's not like, oh, I just got to be able to hit these perfect ramp timers in Sanctum of Domination, and I'll be able to cover all these mechanics so that you don't have to worry about anybody else healing at this point. It's a lot of work where other people can also have that niche, and you could stack those other healers that have the niche, and your output's just lower. Like, even like Pop-Tart Corn Dog, they had like one of the first public Kurog logs, for example, and you could just see how much the Evokers and like Resto Druids just like sucked up on the healing, and PC has a wonderful Disc Priest playing for them, and it was still just like a nightmare to see other classes just so heavily sort of stomp on the spec. So all of this is really heavily 5-man focused, and I don't think it changes the sort of meta that we're in right now for where Disc stands in a raid.
Yeah, I wonder what they're going to do approaching 10.1 in regards to that, because like right now the healing comp next raid is like very obvious, and especially as Shadow Priests are like gaining more value, I feel like a lot of value. Like Shadow Priests are actually fucking crazy good right now if you include their PI. Like attribute that to they're like top 5 on every fight in that raid on logs right now at 95th percentile, assuming the PI. So they're in a good spot, right? So it's definitely down bad for Priest. Hopefully they see more. I'll probably talk to you again in a few weeks to kind of see how you feel like the changes have made, because you'll have a lot of raid farm clears. You'll be able to do this in Mythic Plus. I'm kind of interested to see how you feel like that changes it. What do you feel like, if you could say anything to the devs about like what they really need to focus on with Priest? What is the easiest way to solve this problem?
There's a couple different problems. One of which is there's so many different buttons that do damage. Like Battle for Azeroth was kind of simple, where it was like you cast Schism, it does damage and it increases your next damaging abilities for 9 seconds, and you kind of just cast Schism, cast Smite, cast Penance. It was simple. Now we just have like 9 different abilities or something crazy like that do atonement output. So you're kind of just like jumping between a hell of a lot of them. In my opinion, I think that they should force us into like a really hard shadow route and just make that the best. It'll trim down on a lot of abilities. You'll kind of just like only use Smite as like filler or something. They should focus on making that like the best route to go for from a simplicity standpoint. There's actually an unholy amount of bugs going on right now on PTR that they never fixed for some of the interactions. That Stolen Psyche, Abyssal Reverie I referenced, is currently only working on Mind Blast, which is the way that it worked before. And so they haven't actually updated any of that.
This is we've talked about this with another class. There's something about like a change they made that just literally wasn't working, and it comes out in 12 hours. Yeah. So
there's problems like that, but the spec will still stay very complex if they just bring down some of the damage abilities. I think that's where a lot of the bloat is. It'll still be challenging to like time your ramps. It'll still be challenging to perfect them, put your ramps together. But I think that they could trim down a lot of damage abilities, and that would make things a lot easier. And then I think that they should really just overall increase the baseline atonement output. They nerfed it in beta, and the spec just like never recovered.
Yeah. Okay. I will hit you back up after that, and I need to see if that gets changed. Thanks for coming on and talking disc. We're gonna probably talk about Holy tomorrow, so
let me know.
All right. Yeah.
I'll probably be playing nothing but disc and keys tomorrow, because these changes for